Gather the soft blankets of your rest close around you now, and let the weight of the day sink gratefully into the earth beneath you. We are going on a journey, you and I, a gentle voyage into the heart of a truth so simple it can be forgotten, and so deep it can hold the whole world. A truth about peace. Not the peace that comes when the noise stops, but the peace that is present within the noise, like the silent center of a spinning wheel. Our story begins, as all the best stories do, with a question that had no answer. In a village cradled by emerald mountains, there lived a weaver named Anya. Her fingers were skilled, her tapestries were sought after in markets for days in every direction. But her mind was a marketplace itself, loud, crowded, and endlessly bargaining. Thoughts clattered like coins. Did I use enough indigo? Will the merchant pay fairly? Is that storm cloud coming closer? Why did my friend speak to me so sharply? Her mind wove ceaselessly, not with silk, but with worries, plans, and regrets. At night, when her loom was still, the internal weaving only grew tighter, a tapestry of anxiety that stole her sleep and left her dawns weary. One morning, her frustration a tight knot in her chest, she looked at the vibrant thread in her hand and saw only the worry of it running out. She knew then she needed a different kind of thread, a thread of stillness. She had heard whispers of an old monastery, Songshan, perched high in the mist-wrapped peaks, where monks practiced a profound silence. They said the abbot, a man named Lin, possessed a peace so deep that birds would alight on his still shoulders, mistaking him for an ancient kindly tree. Driven by a quiet desperation, Anya packed a simple satchel. She left her loom, her half-finished work, and began the climb. The path was steep, the air grew thin and cool. With each step, she tried to leave a thought behind, a worry about her garden on a stone, a grievance against a neighbor on a twist of root. But new thoughts simply rushed in to fill the space, like water finding every crack. By the time she reached the simple wooden gate of Songshan, she was breathless in both body and spirit. She was met not by the abbot, but by a young novice with eyes as calm as a forest pool. Without a word, he bowed and led her to a small bare cell with a mat, a low table, and a single window framing a slice of endless silent sky. "Abbot Lin is in meditation," the novice whispered. "He will see you at the bell." Hours passed. Anya sat, then paced, then sat again. The silence of the monastery was not an empty silence. It was a living silence. It had texture. She could hear the distant chant of a single voice, the sigh of the wind through ancient pines, the soft, rhythmic scrape of a broom in a far-off courtyard. It was a silence that listened, and in its listening made her own mental noise scream in contrast. Her thoughts felt like unruly children shouting in a sacred library. Finally, a sound, a single resonant pure note that seemed not to break the silence, but to bloom from its very heart. The evening bell, its tone washed over the stones, through the wood, through her very bones, humming a single clear message of now. She was led to the abbot's chamber. Abbot Lin was indeed like an old tree. His face was a map of kindly erosion, his movements slow and rooted. But his eyes were not old. They were like the sky in her window, vast, clear, and utterly present. He poured her tea, the steam curling a silent question mark between them. "Abbot," Anya began, her words tumbling out in a rushed stream. "I cannot find peace. My mind is a loom of troubles. It weaves day and night. I seek your wisdom. How do I silence it? What mantra must I chant? What discipline must I follow?" Lin took a slow sip of tea, placing the cup down with infinite care. "Ah," he said, his voice the soft rustle of leaves. "You wish to stop the weaving. But tell me, weaver Anya, when you are at your loom, creating something beautiful, do you fight the thread?" Anya blinked. "Fight it? No, that would make it not break. I follow it. I guide it." "Exactly," Lin said, a hint of a smile in his eyes. "You do not command it to be silent. You do not shout at it to become a different color. You observe its tension, its path, its place in the pattern. You work with it." He leaned forward slightly. "Your thoughts are not the problem, Anya. Your war against them is the loom of suffering. You are trying to silence one masterpiece so you can begin another. But peace is not a new tapestry. It is the space in which the tapestry appears." He saw her confusion, her longing for a simple instruction. "For tonight," he said, "no mantras, no disciplines, only this. You will stay and listen to the bell." "The bell? But it only rings at dawn and dusk." "Oh, it is always ringing," Lin said, his smile deepening. "You have simply forgotten how to hear it." That night, Anya lay on her mat. The mountain coal seeped in, and the unfamiliar silence was a presence in the room. Her mind, as predicted, provided its usual commentary. "This is foolish. What bell? I'm wasting my time. My back aches." She wrestled with the thoughts, trying to push them away, which only gave them more strength. Exhausted, near tears, she remembered the abbot's words, "You do not fight the thread." With a sigh of surrender, she stopped fighting. She let the thoughts come, but instead of following them into their stories, she tried something new. She imagined each thought as a leaf floating down a wide, calm river. A worry about home, she saw it, named it worry, and let it float by. A memory of an argument, she saw it, named it memory, and watched it drift around a bend. She didn't grab the leaves. She didn't jump in the river. She just sat on the bank, watching the water flow. And then, in a gap between the leaves, she heard it, or rather, she felt it. Beneath the rustle of her mind river, there was a hum, a deep, steady, vibrational stillness. It was the hum of the mountain itself, the hum of the ancient stones of the monastery, the hum of her own alive, breathing body. It had been there all along, a foundational note beneath the cacophony, the bell that is always ringing. The next morning, at the dawn bell, the sound was different. It wasn't an external sound interrupting silence. It was the inner hum given a voice, singing out loud for all to hear. It was the universe saying, "Here, now, this." Days turned into weeks. Anya performed simple tasks, sweeping courtyards, washing vegetables, sewing torn robes. The novice taught her walking meditation, where each step was a homecoming to the earth. Lift, move, place, feel the stone, feel the air. Be here for just this step. At first, her mind raced ahead to the 10th step, stumbled over the 5th, but slowly she returned, again and again, to the 1. One afternoon, she was assigned to polish the great bronze bell in its wooden tower. As she carefully rubbed the ancient metal with a soft cloth, she saw her distorted reflection in its curve, a wobbly, elongated version of herself. She saw the sky reflected behind her. She, the bell, and the sky were all one swirling image. A question rose in her. Where do I end and the world begins? The solid Anya she carried felt less solid, more like a temporary pattern in the great reflection of things. She sought out Abbot Lin. "I hear the bell now," she said, "and in the quiet, I've begun to see connections. The thread in my tapestry comes from the silkworm, who ate the mulberry leaf, which drank the rain, which fell from the sky. My anger at a customer is fed by my pride, which is stitched from old wounds. Everything seems to cause everything else. It's overwhelming. Lin nodded. You are seeing dependent arising, the tapestry of reality. It can feel heavy to see all those threads. But see this too. He pointed to a simple clay bowl on his table. What is this bowl? It is a bowl for your tea. Is it the clay? Yes, of course. But if it were solid clay with no empty space inside, could it hold tea? No. So, Lin said gently, the bowl is both the clay and the empty space, the form and the emptiness. They depend on each other to be bowl. Your thoughts, your feelings, your very self, they are the clay. The awareness that sees them come and go, that is the empty space. You are not just the weaving, Anya. You are also the space in which the weaving takes place. The open sky, not just the passing clouds. A profound relief washed through her, lighter than the mountain air. She was not just a knot of tangled threads. She was the room in which the loom sat. The peace she sought wasn't a new pattern to weave. It was the still, accepting awareness that had been watching the weaving all along. The day came for her to descend the mountain. She stood before Abbot Lin, no longer desperate, but quiet, grounded. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Live your understanding, he said. Weave your tapestries, drink your tea. When the mind weaving starts, don't fight the thread. Feel the breath. Hear the bell that never stops. You carry the monastery within you now. Anya returned to her village, to her loom. The noises of life returned, the market shouts, the creak of the loom, the chatter of neighbors. But something was different. She still had thoughts, worries, joys and sorrows. But now there was a space around them. She would catch herself getting tangled in a story of the future, and with a soft inner smile, she would feel her feet on the floor, the thread in her hand, the breath in her lungs. Lift, move, place. She would listen for the hum beneath it all, the silent bell of the present moment. And at night, when she lay down to sleep, she practiced the gentlest meditation of all. She would let the river of the day flow by. Sights, sounds, conversations, all just leaves on the water. She wouldn't follow them. She would simply rest as the bank, as the open sky, listening to the deep, soothing hum of existence, the lullaby that had been singing since the beginning of time. In a kingdom cradled by misty, azure mountains, there was a valley known as the Valley of Echoing Questions. The people there were kind. Their terraced rice fields were lush and green, but a collective unease hummed beneath the surface of their lives. It was as if everyone was listening for an answer to a question they had forgotten how to ask. They measured their days in achievements, their worth in possessions, and their peace in the absence of trouble. Yet, trouble, in the form of passing storms, fleeting illnesses, and inevitable losses, visited all, leaving behind a residue of fear. On the western slope of the valley lived a young man named Kaito. Kaito had a mind like a brilliant, restless bird. It could build intricate plans, solve complex problems, and imagine dazzling futures. But this bird was never at rest. It fluttered from past regrets to future anxieties, pecking at memories and worrying over possibilities. At night, while the valley slept, Kaito's mind stage was most brightly lit. Did I speak wisely today? What if the harvest fails? Does my life have a true purpose? The questions echoed in his silent room, leaving him exhausted at dawn. His greatest fear was a simple human one, the fear of emptiness. To be without a plan, a goal, an identity, felt to him like standing at the edge of a vast, terrifying void. So he filled the void with work, with study, with chatter, with striving. He became a collector of answers, but the central question, the source of his unrest, remained shrouded in mist. One autumn, when the maple leaves blazed like quiet fire, a rumor drifted into the valley. It spoke of an old hermit who lived in a cave near the solitary peak of Mount Serene, the highest and most still of the surrounding mountains. They said this hermit, known simply as the Lantern Keeper, had discovered the answer to the silent question. They said he possessed a peace so profound that snow leopards would sleep at the mouth of his cave, and the very air around him seemed to vibrate with a deep, wordless calm. Driven by a yearning he could no longer ignore, Kaito packed a small satchel. He told his family he was going to study with a great sage, but in his heart, he was a thirsty man seeking a spring. The climb was arduous. The well-trodden paths of the lower slopes gave way to rocky, silent trails. The air grew thin and clear. With each step, he felt he was leaving the world of echoes behind, but his internal echo chamber grew louder. Is this the right path? What will I ask him? What if he isn't real? After 3 days of climbing, he found the cave. It was not grand, but a simple opening in the rock, curtained by a fall of gentle ivy. Before it, on a flat stone, sat the Lantern Keeper. He was not what Kaito expected. He was not imposing or mystical looking, but rather he seemed entirely ordinary, and yet completely at home. He was polishing a simple bronze lantern, his movements flowing and effortless. He looked up, and his eyes met Kaito's. They held no judgment, no surprise, only a quiet, welcoming awareness, like a still pool reflecting the sky perfectly. Kaito, breathless from the climb and his nervous anticipation, burst forth with his prepared speech. Venerable One, I have come from the valley of echoing questions. My mind is a tempest. I seek the answer. I seek the secret of your peace. Please teach me the truth so I may end my suffering and find true happiness. The Lantern Keeper placed the polished lantern down carefully. He gestured to her opposite stone. Sit, he said, his voice the sound of a distant stream. You have climbed far. Rest. When Kaito was seated, the old man asked, What is it you wish to know? Everything, Kaito exclaimed. The meaning of life, the nature of the self, how to still the mind, the path to enlightenment. A gentle smile touched the hermit's lips. Ah, you seek many things. That is a heavy burden to carry up a mountain. He paused, looking not at Kaito, but at the vast valley below, swimming in afternoon haze. The mind that seeks an answer is often the very noise that drowns it out. Before we speak of truths, let us perform a simple task. Each dusk, I light this lantern. Tonight, you will do it. Kaito was perplexed. Lighting a lantern. He had come for profound wisdom, not mundane chores, but he nodded in assent. As the sun began to melt into the western ridges, bathing the world in liquid gold, the Lantern Keeper handed Kaito a long, thin taper. Light the candle within, he instructed, and then place the lantern here. He pointed to a niche in the rock outside the cave. Kaito struck a flint, lit the taper, and carefully transferred the flame to the lantern's wick. A warm, small globe of light blossomed in the bronze frame. He placed it in the niche. The hermit said nothing, simply observing. Kaito waited for further instruction, for a lesson about inner light or dispelling darkness. None came. They sat in silence as the stars emerged, pinpricks in a velvet dome. The lantern's light was humble but steadfast, holding its own against the immense darkness. 3 nights passed in this manner. Each dusk, Kaito lit the lantern. Each day he followed the hermit in silent routines, drawing water from a spring, gathering a few wild berries, sweeping the cave mouth with a twig broom. His restless mind screamed in protest. This is a waste of time. He is teaching me nothing. I am no closer to the answers. He watched the hermit, trying to glean some secret technique from his posture, his breathing. But the man simply was. He was fully present, whether sipping water or gazing at a cloud. On the 4th morning, frustration overflowed. "Venerable one," Kaito said, his voice tight, "I am grateful for your hospitality, but I came to learn. I light the lantern, but I do not understand the lesson. My questions still rage inside me. Please, speak to me of the Dharma." The lantern keeper nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a passing cloud. "Very well, come." He led Kaito away from the cave, along a narrow path that clung to the mountainside, ending at a small, secluded pool fed by a trickle of snowmelt. The water was so clear it was invisible. Only the stones at the bottom, sharp and detailed, revealed its presence. The surface was perfectly still, a mirror for the sky and the overarching pine. "Sit here," the hermit said, "and look into this pool. Tell me what you see." Kaito sat. "I see the reflection of the sky, the clouds, the tree, and the water itself," the hermit asked. Kaito peered closer. "It is clear. I see the stones beneath." "Good," said the hermit. "Now take this." He handed Kaito a small, smooth stone. "Drop it into the center." Puzzled, Kaito did so. Plink. The stone broke the surface and sank. Concentric rings rippled outwards, shattering the perfect reflections into a chaotic, shimmering dance. The sky, the tree, were gone, replaced by waving, broken lines. "What do you see now?" the hermit asked. "Chaos," Kaito replied. "The reflections are destroyed. All I see are ripples." "Watch," the hermit said softly. They waited. Slowly, inevitably, the ripples subsided. The agitation faded. The water smoothed itself from the edges inward until, once again, it was a flawless mirror. The sky and the tree returned as if they had never left. "The pool," the hermit said quietly, "does not cling to the sky. It does not resist the stone. It allows the sky to appear. It allows the stone to disturb. And it knows, in its own watery way, how to return to stillness. The clarity is its nature. The ripples are simply what happens upon its surface." He turned his gentle gaze to Kaito. "Your mind, Kaito, is this water. Your thoughts, your fears, your burning questions. These are the stones you drop into it, one after another. You spend all your time staring at the chaotic ripples, believing they are the true nature of the water. You shout at the ripples to calm down, which only throws in another stone. You seek a magical answer that will stop the stones from ever falling." Kaito felt a shift within, a quiet crack in his solid understanding. "But the stones are real. The worries, the pains." "Oh, they are," the hermit agreed. "The stone is real. The ripple is real. But are they the water? You have identified yourself with the ripples, the ever-changing, agitated content of your mind. You believe you are the worry, the plan, the seeker. But you are the water, the awareness that holds it all, the space in which the ripples arise and pass." He gestured back toward the cave. The lantern does not fight the darkness. It does not shout, "Begone, darkness." It simply is what it is, a small, steady flame. Its nature is to shine. Your nature, Kaito, is to be aware, to know, to be this clear, vast capacity for experience. You need not stop the stones from falling. You need only remember you are the deep pool, not the passing ripple. A profound silence settled over Kaito, different from the frustrated silence before. This was a silence of understanding, not of absence. It was the silence of the pool between ripples. He stayed on the mountain through the turning of the seasons. The hermit taught him no complex philosophies. Instead, they practiced simply being with what is. They sat in meditation, not to achieve a special state, but to become familiar with the water-like nature of the mind. When a thought arose, a stone of memory, a pebble of planning, Kaito learned to see it, acknowledge it. Ah, a stone, and let it pass through, sinking to the bottom of his awareness without churning up endless waves of story. He practiced mindful walking, feeling the earth meet his foot over and over, coming home to the body, the anchor in the present moment. He learned the middle way, not chasing extreme pleasures nor inflicting harsh austerities, but finding the balanced, gentle path of caring for the body and mind. He saw the interconnectedness of all things, the water from the pool that evaporated to become the cloud, that fed the pine tree whose needles fell to soften the earth. He, the hermit, the lantern, the pool, all were part of an endless, flowing tapestry of cause and condition. One day, he realized his frantic questions had quieted. Not because he had found intellectual answers, but because the questioner, the small, separate Kaito, who felt apart from the world and desperately needed answers, had begun to dissolve. What remained was a sense of being part of the mountain's silence, the pool's clarity, the lantern's gentle glow. When spring came again, Kaito knew it was time to return to the valley. He bowed deeply to the lantern keeper. "What wisdom do I take back?" he asked. "The wisdom you have always carried," the hermit said. "Be a lantern in the valley, not by preaching, but by being. When others are lost in the storm of their ripples, be the reminder of the still water beneath. Light your simple flame each day, without fuss. Draw water, sweep the floor, tend the garden. Do each thing with your whole presence, and when the stones fall into your own pool, as they will, remember, you are the water. You are the awareness. You are the space for it all." Kaito returned to the valley of echoing questions. He did not return as a dramatic sage, but as a calmer, quieter version of himself. He resumed his life, but the quality of his presence had changed. People came to him, drawn by a new peace in his eyes. They poured out their troubles, their echoing questions. He rarely gave direct advice. Instead, he might say, "Shall we sit quietly for a moment?" Or, "Feel the cup of tea in your hands, its warmth." He taught them to watch their breath, to feel their feet on the ground, to notice the space between their thoughts. He told them the story of the mountain, the lantern, and the pool. And at night, when he lay down to sleep, Kaito practiced the ultimate surrender. He would let the sensations of the day, the sights, sounds, feelings, be like stones sinking through the deep, dark, kindly water of his awareness. He wouldn't follow them. He would simply rest as the water, vast, still, and clear. In a land of whispering bamboo forests and lotus-covered ponds, there was a town known for its exquisite silk. The looms clacked day and night, weaving threads of silver, gold, and deepest indigo into tapestries that told stories of heroes and dragons. In this town lived a master weaver named Lee. Her fingers were swift as darting swallows, her eye for color unmatched. She could weave a scene so vivid you could feel the dragon's breath, hear the rustle of the princess's gown, But Lee carried a secret sorrow, a thorn in her heart no one could see. Her mind was not on the beauty under her hands, but always, always somewhere else. As she wove a sunrise, she worried about the market price of cochineal red. As she crafted a serene forest, she re-argued a conversation from yesterday, or rehearsed one for tomorrow. Her present moment was a prison, and her thoughts were the restless guards, pacing between the bars of past and future. The joyous hum of creation had been replaced by a silent, frantic scream. At night, sleep eluded her. Behind her closed eyes, the loom of her mind worked faster, tangling threads of regret and anxiety into knots of pure exhaustion. One evening, as a monsoon rain drummed a soothing rhythm on the tile roof, her elderly aunt, May, a woman whose face was a roadmap of gentle smiles, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Little Lee," she said, using the childhood name, "the cloth you weave is beautiful, but the weaver is lost. There is a temple, a day's journey up the Jade River. It is called the Monastery of the Present Moon. They say the monks there have learned the art of touching the now. Perhaps they can help you find what your shuttle seeks." Desperate for a stillness she could not conjure, Lee packed a small bundle. She left her magnificent, half-finished tapestries, a testament to her skill and her misery, and followed the Jade River upstream. The well-worn path of commerce gave way to a quieter track. The noise of the town was replaced by the river's constant chuckling song and the chorus of cicadas. Yet, inside her, the noise raged on. Is this the right path? What if they turn me away? What about the commission for the magistrate? The monastery of the present moon was not grand. It was a humble collection of wooden buildings nestled in a grove of ancient ginkgo trees, their fan-shaped leaves turning to gold. It seemed less built than grown from the forest itself. She was met at the gate by a monk whose robes were the color of earth and whose eyes held the calm of deep, still water. "I have come," Lee said, her voice tight with weariness, "to learn how to quiet my mind, to find peace." The monk named An bowed slightly. "Peace is not a thing to be found, Sister Weaver," he said softly. "It is a space to be recognized. But come, you are welcome." He led her to a small bare room. "For now, there is only one instruction. Help in the kitchen tomorrow at dawn." The next morning, Lee joined the silent kitchen work. Her task was to wash rice. A simple, repetitive motion. Scoop, swish, drain. But her mind was not on the rice. It was on the strange silence of the monks, on the peculiarity of her assignment, on the unfinished tapestry back home. She swirled the rice so vigorously she spilled half the water. She sighed in frustration. Anne, who was quietly chopping vegetables, looked up. "Where are you right now, Lee?" "I am here washing rice," she said, irritation tinging her voice. "Are you?" he asked gently. "Your hands are here, but your mind? It is in your workshop. It is on the path you walked yesterday. It is in a tomorrow you imagine. Your body and mind are in two different worlds. This is the source of your fatigue. To be split in two is exhausting." He put down his knife. "Let us try again. This time, do not wash rice to finish it. Wash rice to wash rice. Feel the cool water. See the individual grains like tiny pearls. Hear the soft, watery sound. When a thought about home arises, do not follow it. Acknowledge it. Ah, a thought of home. And let it go, like a leaf floating past on the river outside. Bring your attention back to the water, to the rice, to this single moment." It felt absurd, yet Lee tried. Scoop. Feel the ceramic bowl. Cool, smooth. Swish. Listen to the water. See the cloudiness. A thought arose. This is silly. Ah, a thought of silliness, she whispered inwardly. She let it drift away, returning to the sensation in her hands. For a few fleeting seconds, there was only the rice, the water, the sound. A tiny, profound space opened up. In that space there was no worry, only being. It lasted but a heartbeat before the chatter rushed back in, but she had felt it. A crack of light in a dark room. Days turned into weeks. Lee performed simple tasks, sweeping leaves, tending the herb garden, mending robes. Each was an exercise in coming home to the present. Walking meditation, called kinhin, became her favorite. Lift a foot, aware you are lifting. Move it, aware you are moving. Place it, aware the earth receives it, and instructed. At first she stumbled over her own thinking, but gradually, step by step, breath by breath, she began to inhabit her own life. One afternoon, Anne took her to the banks of the Jade River. The water flowed steadily, never pausing, never the same. This river, Anne said, is your life, your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations. They are the water. You have been trying to build a dam to stop it, to hold on to pleasant moments and block unpleasant ones. Or you have been trying to jump upstream to change what has already flowed past. This is suffering. Look at the river. It does not cling to the lotus flower that floats on it. It does not hate the fallen branch. It carries all, touches all, and lets all go. Can you be like the river with your own experience? Lee watched the water. She saw a bright leaf twirl in an eddy, then be swept on. She saw her own reflection, shattered and reformed by the current. A deep understanding began to settle in her bones. She was not the static image in the water. She was the flowing itself. Her greatest lesson came in the pottery shed, and asked her to make a simple drinking bowl. Her hands, so skilled with thread, were clumsy with clay. She centered it on the wheel, but it wobbled. She pulled it up, but it collapsed. Frustration, an old familiar friend, heated her cheeks. You are trying to force the clay into being a bowl, Anne observed calmly. You have an idea of bowl in your mind, and you are at war with the reality of the clay. Stop, close your eyes, feel the clay, cool, slick, alive with potential. What does it wish to become? Collaborate with it. Do not command it. Lee closed her eyes. She let go of the perfect bowl in her mind. She felt the gritty, yielding substance. She allowed her hands to listen, to respond. The next attempt was not perfect, but it was harmonious. It was a true collaboration between her intent and the clay's nature. When it was fired, it emerged a lopsided, humble, yet deeply beautiful thing. She understood. Her life was this clay. She had been warring with its inherent nature, trying to force it into a rigid tapestry of her own design. The night before her departure, she sat with Anne under the ginkgo tree, its golden leaves glowing in the lantern light. I think I understand, she said, her voice quiet as the falling leaves. I am not the tangled thoughts. I am the awareness that knows the thoughts. I am not the weaver trying to control the pattern. I am the space in which the weaving happens. And smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. You have seen the moon reflected in the river. Do not mistake the reflection for the moon itself. Go back to your town. Weave your beautiful silks, but weave with your whole self. When you thread the shuttle, just thread the shuttle. When the customer haggles, just listen. When joy comes, let it flow through you like sunlight. When sorrow comes, let it flow through you like rain. Be the river, not the stone trapped at the bottom. Lee returned home. She sat at her loom. For the first time, she felt the smoothness of the bamboo shuttle in her palm. She heard the distinct clack-clack thump as a love song. She saw the vibrancy of the dye not as a commodity, but as a miracle. She wove, and her weaving was more alive than ever, because she was fully there to witness its birth. And when night fell, and she lay in her bed, she practiced the final surrender. She would let the sensations of the day, the silk, the voices, the colors, flow through her like the jade river, touching her, but not sticking. She would rest as the deep, still awareness behind it all, the silent witness, the boundless sky through which the weather of life passed. My dear friend, close your eyes now. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the embrace of your bed as a stone settles peacefully into the soft mud of a riverbed. The day's light has faded, its colors and sounds now softening into the gentle monochrome of evening. Let us travel together, not with haste, but with the slow, inevitable drift of a cloud across a mountain's face. Let us journey to a place where wisdom is not spoken, but felt in the spaces between words, where peace is not a destination, but the very ground upon which we walk. Our story unfurls in a time when the world moved to the rhythm of seasons, not seconds, in the heart of a vast mist-wrapped kingdom, where the cities were knots of bustling humanity and the mountains stood as silent, green-cloaked sentinels. There lived a man named Wen. Wen was a scholar of great repute. His mind was a vast library, its shelves groaning with the weight of philosophies, histories, and poetic verses. He could debate the nature of virtue until dawn, trace the lineage of emperors for 1,000 years, and compose a poem that would make a courtier weep. Yet, within the vaulted halls of his own mind, Wen was a haunted man. His thoughts were not serene scrolls of wisdom, but a flock of frantic, shrieking birds, forever circling, forever unsettled. When he read of peace, his mind shouted about a political rival's slight. When he admired the moon's serenity, his heart clenched with a memory of a love long lost. His sleep was a shallow pond, constantly rippled by the pebbles of tomorrow's anxieties. Will my treatise be accepted? Is my son applying himself? What is the meaning of all this striving? He was a master of the past and a prisoner of the future, yet a stranger to the humble, quiet room of the present moment. A deep, unnameable thirst plagued him, a thirst that no amount of knowledge, acclaim, or jasmine tea could quench. One evening, as a silvery autumn rain whispered secrets to the tiles of his roof, his eldest servant, a man named Lao, whose back was bent like a wise old willow, entered the study. Seeing Wen massaging his temples, his eyes on a scroll, but seeing nothing, Lao spoke softly. "Master Wen, forgive an old man's impertinence, but I see a shadow where your light should be. In the western mountains, where the clouds birth the rivers, there is a temple they call the monastery of the uncarved block. They say no books are kept there, for they study the scripture of the whispering pines and the silent snow. They say the abbot, a man known as Teacher An, knows a stillness that can calm the stormiest mind. A spark, faint but persistent, ignited in Wen's weary soul. The very name, uncarved block, spoke of something primal, whole, untouched by the chisel of anxiety. Leaving his library, his titles, his world of ink and paper, Wen donned the simple clothes of a traveller. He took only a walking staff and a heart full of tangled questions. His journey was a slow unwinding. The paved roads gave way to dirt paths, then to deer trails. The chatter of commerce was replaced by the soliloquy of wind in high grasses and the chorus of 1,000 crickets. Yet, with every step away from the city, the noise within him seemed to grow louder. as if protesting its impending silence. Have I made a mistake? What foolishness is this, chasing rumors? What if he asks me of the classics and I falter? After days of walking, he found it. The monastery of the uncarved block was not a grand complex of pagodas, but a collection of simple wooden structures that seemed to have grown, like mushrooms, from the forest floor. It clung to the side of the mountain, overlooking a valley where a great silver river curled like a sleeping dragon. The air was crisp, scented with pine and damp earth. At the gate, he was met not by teacher An, but by a young novice with eyes as clear and untroubled as the mountain springs. The novice bowed, wordlessly took Wen's small bundle, and led him to a bare cell containing only a thin sleeping mat, a low table, and a window that framed a breathtaking vista of endless, receding blue peaks. "Teacher An welcomes you," the novice said softly. "He is in meditation. You may join the community in the hall for the evening sitting." That first meditation was an agony of revelation. In the silent, lantern-lit hall, surrounded by figures as still as stones in a stream, Wen confronted the sheer pandemonium of his own mind. It was as if, in the outer quiet, every one of his mental birds began to shriek at once. Memories, plans, snippets of poetry, fears, they crashed into each other in a cacophonous torrent. His legs ached, his back screamed, and his pride withered. He, the great scholar, was defeated by a simple instruction: sit and be aware. After the bell signaled the end of the sitting, Wen, humbled and raw, was finally taken to meet teacher An. The abbot was sitting on a woven mat in a Spartan room, sipping tea. He was not an imposing figure. He was small, his shaved head reflecting the lamplight, his robe patched and faded. But his presence filled the room like the scent of incense. It was solid, calm, utterly undemanding. He looked at Wen, and his gaze did not assess or judge. It simply saw, with a compassion so deep, it felt like a physical warmth. Wen, his voice uncharacteristically timid, spilled forth his confession. "Venerable An, I am lost. I have consumed libraries, but my mind is a starving beast. I seek peace but find only turmoil. I have come to learn the great truth. Please teach me the Dharma. Help me silence this chaos." Teacher, Wan poured a second cup of tea and pushed it gently towards Wen. He took a long, slow sip, his eyes resting on the steam rising in the cool air. Finally, he spoke, his voice the sound of a distant stream over smooth stones. "You wish to silence chaos, but tell me, Scholar Wen, when you hear the river below us, its constant rushing song, do you call it chaos?" Wen listened. The river's sound floated up through the window, a steady, white noise hum. "No," he said, "it is just the river. It is its nature to flow and make sound. Is your mind not the same?" Anne asked gently. "It is its nature to think, to feel, to remember. To try to silence the river is a war against water. To try to silence the mind is a war against your own nature. The problem is not the noise, Wen. The problem is that you are lost in the noise, drowning in its stories, believing you are the stormy water, not the sky through which the storm passes." He set down his cup. "For now, there are no teachings, only tasks. Tomorrow, you will go to the riverbank with Jin here." He gestured to the young novice. "And you will fill the water jars for the kitchen. Do only this." The next day, task in hand, Wen felt a fool. Filling water jars, he was a scholar. Yet he followed Jin to the river's edge. The water was achingly clear, tumbling over mossy stones. His first attempts were clumsy, his mind miles away. He sloshed water overfilled the jar, his thoughts on metaphysics, while his body performed a peasant's chore. Jin, working beside him with fluid, effortless movements, said nothing. On the third day, as Wen grumpily submerged a jar, a flash of silver, a fish, darted away. The sun caught the spray, creating a tiny, fleeting rainbow. For a split second, Wen was there. Not in his head, but at the river's edge. He felt the jar's cool weight, saw the fractal dance of light on water, heard the specific gurgle of the current around that particular rock. The moment passed, but it left a ghost of peace in its wake. He began to understand. This was the practice, to come back again and again, from the sprawling city of his thoughts to the simple, sensory reality of this. The rough rope handle, the cold water on his wrists. Weeks melted into months, marked not by calendars, but by the slow turning of the mountain's face towards the winter sun. Wen's tasks changed. He swept courtyards, learning to see the dance of dust in a sunbeam, not as a chore, but as a phenomenon of light. He chopped wood, feeling the shock of the axe in his palms, the clean smell of split pine. He practiced working meditation, where the task itself was the object of focus. Teacher An gave him a personal koan, a paradoxical question not to be solved by intellect, but to be lived. What is your original face before your parents were born? The question haunted him. It stripped away all his identities: scholar, father, worried man. Who was he, absent all these stories? In the deep silence of the zendo, he would sink into the question, not seeking an answer, but letting the question dismantle the questioner. One afternoon, Teacher An led him to the monastery's humble pottery shed. A lump of wet grey clay sat on the wheel. "Make a bowl for your tea," An said. Wen's hands, so deft with a brush, were clumsy oafs with clay. He tried to force the spinning mound into a perfect, symmetrical form. It wobbled, collapsed, and splattered. Frustration, his old companion, boiled up. "You are imposing bowl upon the clay," An observed quietly. "You are not listening to it. Feel it. What is its nature? Wet, malleable, heavy. Collaborate with that. Let the bowl emerge from the conversation between your intention and the clay's being." Wen closed his eyes. He let go of the ideal bowl. He felt the cool, slick substance, its gritty texture. He allowed his hands to respond, to guide, not to dominate. What emerged was lopsided, with a thick base and a wavy rim. A deeply imperfect, yet utterly authentic object. When it was fired, it held his tea perfectly. He understood. His life was this clay. He had been warring with its inherent nature, its losses, its joys, its aging, its uncertainties, trying to force it into the rigid, perfect vessel of his expectations. Suffering was the friction between what is and what I demand it to be. The most profound lesson came with the monastery's ancient bell. It was rung only at dawn and dusk. "Teacher," and gave him the duty of ringing the evening bell. "When you strike it," and instructed, "do not just hit metal. Listen. Listen to the very first moment of sound. Then listen as the sound lives, vibrates, expands to fill the valley. Then listen most carefully as the sound fades, dies away into silence. Follow the note all the way home to where it came from." The first time Wen did this, it was a revelation. The Bon Gwaji was not a single event, but a living journey. It was born from the strike, swelled into a golden, palpable presence that shook the air in his chest, and then, ever so gradually, softened, thinning out into a shimmer, then a whisper, then nothing. A profound, ringing silence that was different from ordinary silence. It was a silence pregnant with the bell's absence, a silence that felt more real, more fundamental than the sound itself. Where did the sound go? Anne asked him afterwards. It faded into silence. And where did it come from? From the strike, from the metal. And before the strike, and pressed his eyes gentle. Was there not a silence that held the potential for the bell's sound? The sound arose from silence, lived its life and returned to silence. Your thoughts, when, are just like this. They arise from the silent awareness of your mind. They dance for a while, and they subside back into it. You have been chasing the sounds, fearing some, clinging to others. But have you ever considered resting as the silence that holds them all? It was as if a bolt of lightning had illuminated a landscape Wen had been stumbling through in the dark. He wasn't his thoughts. He was the awareness that knew the thoughts. He wasn't the feeling of anxiety. He was the space in which anxiety appeared and dissolved. He was the uncarved block itself, the primal, untouched awareness prior to all stories, all labels, all suffering. The seasons turned full circle. The green mountains wore a crown of snow, then shed it for a cloak of wildflowers. Wen's frantic mind-birds hadn't vanished, but they had calmed. He no longer lived in their nest. He watched them come and go from the steady ground of his awareness. The thirst that had driven him up the mountain was gone, quenched not by an answer, but by the discovery that he was the very spring he had been seeking. The day came to return to the world. He stood before teacher An, not as a scholar seeking wisdom, but as a man who had glimpsed his original face. "What do I do now?" Wen asked. "What you have always done," An said, with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Drink tea, read your books, love your family, but do so with this new understanding. When you read, just read. When you listen, just listen. When worry comes, greet it. Know it for what it is, a passing weather pattern in the sky of your mind, and let it go. Be the silent bell after the sound has faded. Hold the world in that spacious silence." Wen bowed deeply, a gesture not of submission, but of profound gratitude. He walked back down the mountain, but he carried the monastery within him. The bustling city seemed different, not less noisy, but the noise now happened within his peace, not outside of it. He was the riverbank, steadfast, while the waters of life flowed past. And when night fell, in his own bed, he practiced the ultimate homecoming. He would lie still and feel the breath moving in his body, a gentle tide. He would listen to the sounds of the sleeping house, not as interruptions, but as notes in the night's quiet song. He would watch thoughts and sensations arise and pass, like shapes in a fire, with no need to grasp or push away. He would rest as the boundless, silent awareness, the uncarved block, the original face, the home he had never left. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a sigh, a soft, weary exhalation that escaped the lips of a man named Haru every evening as he stood at the edge of his magnificent garden. To the villagers of the Cloud's Rest Valley, Haru was a wizard of the soil, a poet whose medium was petal and leaf. His garden was a legend. Pilgrims travelled for days to walk its winding pebble paths, to sit by its carp-filled pond, to breathe air perfumed by night-blooming jasmine and the clean green scent of raked moss. Yet, as the years unfurled like the fronds of his prized ferns, a secret thorn took root in Haru's heart. He no longer saw the dew clinging to a spiderweb at dawn. He saw only a flaw in the web's symmetry. He no longer heard the joyful gurgle of the stone water basin. He heard only that the water level was half an inch too low. His garden had become a scroll of errors, a living testament to his own failure to achieve a perfect frozen idea of beauty. Each fallen blossom was a personal defeat. Each encroaching weed was an insult. His mind, once a quiet companion to growth, had become a harsh, relentless foreman, cataloguing flaws and barking orders to an exhausted soul. Sleep became a foreign country. In the dark, his mind's eye projected grotesque, exaggerated versions of the day's imperfections. Blight spreading like fire, ponds turning to mud, the entire meticulous world he'd built collapsing into chaos. He was a prisoner in a paradise of his own making, and the bars were forged from his relentless thinking. One evening, as the first fireflies began their silent, pulsing dance, his granddaughter, Kiko, a child of 6, with eyes that noticed everything, tugged his sleeve. "Oji-san," she whispered, pointing not at a prized camellia, but at a plain, grey stone half buried in the moss near the old lantern. "Why is that stone so happy?" Haru, startled from his mental ledger of tasks, blinked. "Happy, little one. It is just a stone." Kiko shook her head, her small face serious. "No, it is being a stone. It's not trying to be a flower. It's just sitting. It looks very peaceful." Her words, simple as a drop of water, struck a deep, hidden chord within him. Later that night, as he lay awake listening to the temple bell's distant, solemn note echo through the valley, Kiko's observation merged with the sound. Being a stone, not trying to be a flower. He thought of the oldest story in the valley, that high in the cloud-shrouded peaks, in a place where the wind carved shapes from rock and silence was the only language, there lived a hermit known as the Keeper of the Moss. They said he had not spoken a word in 40 years. They said he understood the secret life of stones, the patience of trees, and could hear the single, perfect sound of one leaf deciding to let go. Driven by a longing deeper than weariness, Haru did something he had not done in decades. He left. He entrusted his precious garden to his apprentices, packed a small satchel of rice and dried plums, and began to climb out of the world of cultivation and into the realm of the wild. The well-tended paths gave way to tangled roots and scree. The curated beauty of his garden was replaced by the untamed, sprawling, glorious chaos of the ancient forest. With every step upward, he felt he was shedding a layer of himself. The layer of Haru the gardener, the perfectionist, the warrior. But the core ache remained. The hermit's dwelling was not a hut, but a shallow cave where the living rock met a carpet of emerald moss so deep and soft it seemed to swallow sound. The Keeper of the Moss was not sitting in serene meditation as Haru had imagined. He was on his hands and knees, his face inches from the ground, utterly motionless. He was so still that a bright-bodied dragonfly had landed on the frayed shoulder of his robe, mistaking him for part of the landscape. Haru stood, uncertain, for a long time. The only sound the sigh of the wind in the pines. Finally, the old man slowly, so slowly it was like watching a mountain move, turned his head. His eyes were the color of dark, wet soil, and they held a depth of quiet that made Haru's heart pound. There was no greeting, no surprise, only a profound, accepting attention. Words tumbled out of Haru, a torrent of pent-up anguish. "Honored one, my garden. It is my life, yet it is killing me. I see only what is wrong. I hear only what is missing. I have lost the peace it was meant to give. They say you understand the silence. Please teach me how to hear it again. Teach me how to see my garden without this pain." The hermit said nothing. He simply looked at Haru. Then his gaze drifted past him, to a young maple sapling struggling from a crack in a boulder. He looked and kept looking, with an intensity that was not fierce, but infinitely soft. Minutes passed. Haru's discomfort grew. Had the man even understood him? Was he simple? Just as Haru was about to speak again, the hermit moved. He pointed a gnarled finger, first at the struggling tree, then at a majestic centuries-old cedar that stood like a king on the ridge, then finally at Haru's own chest. Then he spoke. His voice was the faint, dry rustle of last year's leaves. 3 tasks. First, bring water from the spring to the young maple. 1 bowl each day for 1 moon. Haru was baffled. That was it? Not a koan, not a teaching on impermanence. Just fetch water. But a lifetime of discipline made him bow. I understand. The spring was a 1/4 hour's walk down a treacherous slope. The task was maddening in its simplicity and its difficulty. The first days were agony. Carrying a single, sloshing wooden bowl up the path, Haru's mind was a storm. This is absurd, a child's chore. My garden is suffering without me. Is he mocking me? He spilled more water than he delivered. He stumbled, his frustration a hot stone in his gut. But the hermit, each evening, would be at the maple, not inspecting the water level, but simply being with the tree. Haru began to notice the hermit's posture, a total, relaxed absorption. Slowly, grudgingly, Haru tried to mimic it. Instead of rushing to dump the water, he would stand for a moment. He would feel the cool air, the rough bark under his fingertips. He would look at the tree, really look. He saw not a struggling sapling, but the fierce, determined curl of a root seeking purchase. The vibrant, almost defiant green of its few leaves against the grey stone. One afternoon, as he poured the water, watching it darken the soil and vanish, he had a sudden, clear thought. The tree is not waiting to become the cedar. It is being a maple, perfectly. A space, quiet and cool as the forest shade, opened inside him. It lasted only a breath, but it was a breath of a different, cleaner air. The second task came with the new moon. The hermit led him to a flat, mossy clearing and placed in his hands a perfectly ordinary palm-sized river stone, smoothed by millennia of water. Sit, hold the stone, know the stone, until you can feel its history in your bones. Haru sat. For the first hour, he felt ridiculous. For the second, he grew impatient. By the third, a deep, screaming boredom set in. He analyzed the stone's color, its weight, its temperature. He thought about the river that shaped it, the mountain it came from. He was thinking about the stone, not knowing it. Days passed. His backside grew sore, his legs numb. Then, one rain-dappled morning, a shift occurred. His analytical mind, exhausted, finally began to quiet. In the stillness, his perception deepened. He wasn't just holding the stone. He was feeling its profound stoneness, its absolute unshakable isness. It held no opinion about the rain. It had no memory of the river. It had no fear of eternity. It simply was, complete and sufficient in every moment. A wave of immense, solid peace emanated from the cool weight in his hand and washed through him. He was not Haru holding a stone. He and the stone were two temporary forms in a field of silent, enduring being. He wept without sound, the tears as clean as the rain. The final task was the simplest and most impossible. Now, the hermit whispered, his voice now sounding like the forest itself. Listen. Sit at the foot of the great cedar and listen. Do not listen for anything. Just listen. Report what you hear. Haru sat beneath the cathedral branches of the ancient cedar. He He listened. He heard the wind, first as a general roar, then as 1,000 individual sighs through 1,000 individual needles. He heard a woodpecker's distant drumming, the scuttle of a beetle in the duff. He heard his own heartbeat, his own breath. He reported these to the hermit, who simply nodded. He sat again and again. He listened past the obvious sounds. He heard the creak of the cedar's immense limbs, a sound so slow it was almost below hearing. He heard the silent hydraulic pull of water from roots to highest leaf. He reported this. The hermit's eyes seemed to smile, but he said nothing. Haru sat for days. The catalogue of sounds fell away. His own sense of being a listener, separate from the sound, began to dissolve. One afternoon, in a moment of utter thoughtless openness, it happened. A single yellowed cedar needle detached. It did not rustle. It did not crackle. In the vast, attentive silence Haru had become, he heard it, not with his ears, but with his whole being. He heard the tiny cosmic event of its release, the soft, final sigh of its letting go, the almost imperceptible whisper of its passage through the air, the muted, definitive tap as it met the earth. In that sound, the sound of one leaf falling, he heard the entire universe, birth, life, release, return. It was unbearably beautiful, and it held not a shred of sadness, only perfect, natural completion. He didn't need to report it. The hermit was there, sitting beside him. He looked at Haru, and for the first time, he spoke a full sentence. His voice was clear, like a bell made of wood and wind. You have heard the garden's true song. It is not a song of control, but of allowing, not of holding, but of letting fall. The stone does not try to be a flower. The leaf does not cling to the branch. The gardener does not command the garden. He converses with it. You have been watering the reflection of the maple in your mind, not the tree itself. Your suffering was the space between your idea of the garden and the garden as it is. Haru understood. He had been trying to force a living, breathing, dying, thriving ecosystem into a static painting. His peace would never come from perfect control, but from profound participation, from being the silent, aware space in which the garden's glorious, imperfect life unfolded. He returned to Cloud's Rest Valley as the first cherry blossoms trembled on the boughs. His garden was still there, wilder in his absence, but vibrantly alive. He walked its paths, and for the first time in years he saw. He saw the elegance in the wilting iris. He saw the courageous beauty of the dandelion pushing through the gravel. He heard not just the water in the basin, but the specific music this water made on this day. He tended, yes, but as a partner, not a tyrant. He pulled a weed with respect for its tenacity. He pruned a branch with a sense of collaboration, asking the plant where it wished to grow. And at night, sleep came to him not as an escape, but as a returning. He would lie in the dark and feel his body as part of the earth, heavy and still as the stone. He would listen to the symphony of the night, the pond frogs, the rustle of bamboo, and hear in it the same profound, effortless intelligence that guided the falling leaf. He was no longer a separate gardener tending a separate world. He was an expression of the garden, and the garden was an expression of him, and both were held in the boundless silent awareness that had been there all along. In a kingdom cradled by ancient green-folded hills, there was a city renowned for its silversmiths. The air hummed with the sound of hammers on metal, shaping delicate filigree and ringing bells of pure, sweet tone. In this city lived a mastersmith named Aris. His hands could persuade silver to flow like water, to capture moonlight in a bowl. to sing a note so clear it seemed to stop time itself. Aris was known for one creation above all others, the harmony bell that hung in the city's central square. Its voice was legendary, a single profound note that could, it was said, calm a riotous crowd or soothe a crying child. But Aris carried a secret. While his bells created harmony for others, his own mind was a cacophony. It was a workshop where 100 apprentices hammered at once on different projects, memories of past mistakes, plans for future commissions, worries about his aging parents, critiques of a rival's work. The clangor was constant, a private, exhausting noise that echoed in the silence of his own home. At night, when the city's forges grew cold, the inner forge of his mind burned hottest. Sleep was a fleeting visitor, chased away by the sparks of what if and if only. He was a creator of stillness, forever separate from the peace he forged. One evening, after a particularly restless night, a travelling monk with worn sandals and eyes as calm as a forest pool stopped to admire the harmony bell. Aris, pride touched with his usual weariness, spoke to him. "It holds a single perfect note for a full minute," he said. The monk listened, not to Aris, but to the space after the bell's sound had faded. "The note is beautiful," the monk said softly, "but the silence it returns to, that is profound. Tell me, Master Smith, where does the bell's sound go when it dies away?" Aris, the technician, answered. "It dissipates, the energy transforms, it becomes part of the air, then nothing." The monk smiled. "And from where did it come?" "From the strike of the clapper. From the silver, its shape, its density," Aris replied, slightly impatient. "So," the monk murmured, gazing at the bell as if seeing it for the first time. "The sound is born from silence, lives briefly, and returns to silence. Is the bell, then, the sound? Or is it the potential for sound, resting in stillness?" The question slipped past Aris's analytical mind and lodged itself in his heart like a small, smooth stone. He found he could not answer. The monk, before departing, gave a slight bow. In the mountains to the east, there is a place called the Temple of the Present Vessel. They study not the sound, but the silence that holds it. Aris felt a pull, a longing quieter yet more urgent than any of his mental clamour. He left his workshop in the care of his most senior apprentice. He packed no tools, only a simple robe and a pouch of rice. He walked away from the realm of shaping and into the realm of being. The journey was a slow stripping away. The well-defined roads gave way to paths, then to animal tracks. The metallic scent of his trade was replaced by the scent of damp pine and cold stone. Yet, as the outer noise faded, the inner noise seemed to amplify, shouting to fill the emptiness. "This is folly. Your business will suffer. What are you even seeking?" The temple of the present vessel was hewn partly from the living rock of the mountain. It was not ornate, but simple, its lines echoing the cliffs around it. He was met by an old monk, Master Li, whose face was a landscape of peaceful wrinkles. He moved with a slow, fluid economy, as if every action were a meditation. He said nothing, only gestured for Aris to follow. Aris, bursting with his prepared speech about noise and peace, was led not to a library or a meditation hall, but to the temple kitchens. A giant clay vat of water sat by the hearth. Master Li handed him an empty wooden bucket. "The storeroom roof leaks," Master Li said, his voice like stones gently rubbed together. "When it rains, you will catch the drips in this bucket. Empty it before it overflows." He then turned and left. Aris stood, holding the bucket, in utter confusion. Catch drips? He was a master artisan. He'd come for wisdom, not to be a custodian. The first rain came that afternoon. He sat in the dusty storeroom, bucket positioned under a steady plink. 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 His mind raged. He analyzed the rhythm of the drops, calculated the volume of the bucket, fumed at the indignity. The bucket filled. He emptied it with a scowl. This went on for days. The task was the pinnacle of pointless monotony, but exhaustion with his own rebellion eventually set in. One afternoon, during a soft drizzle, he stopped fighting. He stopped thinking about the drops and simply listened to them. Plink, a single clear sound. A pause. Plink, another. He began to hear the tiny variations, a slightly higher pitch when the drip fell directly to the water's surface, a softer thud when it hit the side of the bucket. His breath slowed. The space between the drips was not empty. It was filled with a rich, listening stillness. For a few moments, Aris wasn't a smith catching water. He was pure awareness, hearing the symphony of a single repeating note. A profound calm, fragile as a soap bubble, enveloped him. When a thought about his workshop arose, a thought, it simply passed through, like a distant bird crossing the sky of his mind, without tearing the stillness. Master Li found him there, sitting peacefully. He said only, "Good. Now you are ready to begin." The next task was to polish the temple's one great treasure, a vast ancient bronze bowl called the Ocean Bowl. For when filled with water, it reflected the sky so perfectly it seemed to hold the heavens. Aris was given a soft cloth and a jar of sweet-smelling oil. "Polish until you see your original face," Master Li instructed. Aris set to work with his craftsman's diligence, seeking a flawless mirror shine. He rubbed for hours, days. He saw his own tired, frowning reflection slowly clear. He saw the distortions, the pores of the metal, the faint, enduring scars of centuries. He polished until his arms ached, but his original face remained elusive. He only saw Aris, the tired smith. Frustrated, he went to Master Li. "I have polished until I can see every flaw. I see only myself, and I am weary." Master Li approached the bowl. He did not look at his reflection. He leaned over and gently stirred the water within with a single finger. The perfect image shattered into swirling, chaotic light. "Where is your face now?" he asked. "Gone. Broken." Was it ever truly there? Master Li countered. Or was it always just a play of light on water, dependent on stillness, on the bowl, on your eyes to see it? Yourself, Aris, is like that reflection, a temporary, dependent arising. You have been polishing the bowl, trying to perfect the reflection, believing it to be solid and real. But your original face is the awareness that sees the reflection come and go. It is the bowl itself, not the image it holds. It was as if a door Aris never knew was locked had swung open. He felt a dizzying, exhilarating sense of space where before there had been only the solid, cramped feeling of me. His final teaching came on a night of brilliant, icy stars. Master Li took him to a frozen waterfall, a cascade of captured motion, glittering in the moonlight. "This was once a roaring river," Master Li said. "Now it is silent still. Is it less of a waterfall? In spring, it will flow again. Is it more of a waterfall then? Its nature is neither the movement nor the stillness. Its nature is waterfulness, which expresses itself in different ways. Your mind is the same. Its nature is awareness. Sometimes it is still, sometimes it races like a torrent. Do not fight the torrent, hoping only for the ice. Do not cling to the ice, fearing the torrent. rest as the knowingness that experiences both. Aris stayed through the winter, watching the waterfall's frozen silence, and was there for the spring thaw, when it roared back to life with terrifying, glorious power. This time, he wasn't afraid of the noise. He sat beside the thundering spray and felt the same peace he had felt listening to the single drip in the storeroom. He had found the bowl of his own awareness, vast enough to hold both the perfect silence and the roaring cascade without being disturbed. When he returned to the city, he was different. He went back to his forge. The sounds were the same, the hammers, the shouts, the hiss of hot metal. But now he heard them as he had heard the waterfall, as phenomena arising and passing in the spaciousness of his attention. He would catch himself beginning to spiral into worry and simply feel the hammer in his hand, the heat on his face, the breath in his lungs. He would come back again and again to this simple, solid present. And at night, sleep was no longer a battleground. Lying in the dark, he would practice. He would feel his body, heavy and real. He would listen to the city's night sounds not as interruptions, but as notes in the quiet. He would watch thoughts and worries arise like shapes in the dark, acknowledge them, planning, regret, and let them go, returning his attention to the anchor of his breath or to the distant, comforting tone of the wind in the eaves. He wasn't trying to force silence. He was resting as the awareness that contained all sound and silence, activity and rest. Our tale unfolds in a forgotten valley, veiled by perpetual mist and known only as the Vale of Lingering Echoes. Here, the people were master weavers, but theirs was no ordinary craft. They did not weave silk or wool, but something far more subtle. They wove with attention, with intention, with the very fabric of perception. They were known as the mind weavers. A parent would weave a tapestry of calm around a restless child, and the child would sigh into peaceful sleep. A healer would weave a net of wholeness around the ill, and fever would break. They lived in apparent harmony, their art a sacred service. Yet, in the heart of this community, lived a young weaver named Ilara, whose skill was unmatched, but whose inner world was a tangle of frayed threads. Ilara's gift was too bright. She didn't just weave for others. She involuntarily wove with the raw stuff of her own mind. Every passing regret became a dark, thorny thread. Every anxiety about the future became a frayed, vibrating wire. Every pleasant memory she clutched at, trying to reweave it into the present, only stretched and distorted it. Her internal loom was never still, its shuttle flying day and night, creating a dense, heavy and chaotic inner tapestry that suffocated her. She wove magnificent peace for others, yet within her own mind, there was only a cacophonous, exhausting marketplace of wants and fears. Sleep was a fleeting ghost, frightened away by the relentless clatter of her own inner loom. Her grandmother, the eldest and wisest weaver, whose eyes were the color of still peat water, saw her suffering. One evening, as Ilara sat staring at her own trembling hands, her grandmother spoke. "Little one, you weave with the threads of memory and dream, but you have forgotten the loom of no thread. You weave somethingness until it becomes a cage. You must learn the art of unweaving." Ilara looked up, desperate. "How, grandmother? The threads come unbidden. They knot themselves." Her grandmother pointed a bony finger toward the great, impenetrable wall of mist that shrouded the northern end of the vale. Beyond the mist wall lies the silent forest. It is said that in its deepest heart stands the tree of uncasting, and by it lives the unweaver. He tends the loom of no thread. He knows the wisdom of the space between. Find him. And so, Ilara set out, leaving behind the familiar clack of looms. She carried no supplies, for the legend said the forest would provide, but only if one asked for nothing. The mist wall was not a barrier, but a transition. Passing through it was like walking from a noisy room into a soundproof chamber. The echoes of the veil vanished. The forest was not silent in a dead way, but in a profoundly alive way. The air itself felt dense with listening. Giant moss-covered stones, ancient as time, dotted the landscape like sleeping gods. No bird sang, but the wind through the pine needles made a soft, sibilant sigh, like the breath of the world. For days, Ilara walked. Without the constant inner weaving to occupy her, her mind at first screamed in protest. It threw up memories, invented fears of the forest, replayed conversations. She was a loom without wool, clacking furiously at nothing. She sat by a black, mirror-still pond and wept from the sheer loneliness of her own company. But the forest's silence was patient. Slowly, exhausted, her mental chatter began to quiet, not through force, but through a kind of starved emptiness. She began to notice, really notice, the fractal pattern of frost on a leaf, the precise geometric architecture of a spider's web beaded with dew, the way a single drop of water would form at the tip of a pine needle, gather light, hold the whole forest upside down in its tiny globe, and then fall, plink, with a sound so definitive and final, it seemed to create the silence that followed. She had no goal now but to be present with the next step, the next breath. She was, for the first time, unwoven. She was not Ilara the weaver, Ilara the anxious, Ilara the seeker. She was simply the awareness walking, seeing, breathing, a profound and unfamiliar peace, both vast and intimate, settled upon her. It was the peace of no story. Finally, she came to a small clearing. In its center stood a tree unlike any other. It was not grand, but ancient and gnarled, its bark like sculpted silver. It seemed less to grow than to simply be, an eternal present in wood form. This was the tree of uncasting. And beneath it, on a plain stone, sat a figure. He was not old, not young. He seemed ageless. He was not weaving. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees, palms up. His eyes were closed, and on his face was an expression of such serene, impartial attention that Ilara felt seen to her core without a single glance being cast her way. This was the unweaver. She did not speak. She simply sat a short distance away and waited. Hours passed. Days. She mimicked his posture, not as an exercise, but because it felt natural. She let the forest sounds wash over her. She watched thoughts arise in her mind. This is it. Has he noticed me? I'm hungry. And remembering the falling water drop, she simply let them fall away. Plink. A thought of home. Plink. A worry. Each one arose, lingered, and dissolved back into the clear space of her awareness. She was practicing the unweaving, thread by mental thread. On the third day, he spoke. His voice was not a sound separate from the forest, but his essence given words. You have come to learn the loom of no thread. It was not a question. Ilara simply bowed her head. You have already begun, he said. You have seen that the thread of a thought, when not grasped, unravels on its own. It returns to the source. The loom of no thread is not a thing, but an understanding. It is the realization that the most fundamental state is not the tapestry, no matter how beautiful or terrible, but the space upon which it appears. You have been identifying with the knots, the colors, the patterns. I point you to the loom itself, which remains empty, still and untouched, whether a masterpiece or a mess is upon it. He opened his eyes then. They were the color of the sky between stars. There are 3 knots to untie. The first is the knot of past and future. He gestured to a stream that bubbled through the clearing. Watch the water. Is it the same water you saw a moment ago? Is it the water that will be here tomorrow? It is only ever this water right now. Your past is a memory, a thought occurring now. Your future is an anticipation, a thought occurring now. Untie the knot by resting in the now water. When a memory arises, know it as a present moment thought, not a past event. Let it flow by. Elara practiced. She sat by the stream. A memory of a childhood failure arose, bringing shame. A present moment thought of a story, she whispered. She did not follow the story. She felt the shame as a sensation in her body, tightness in her chest, and watched that too, until it softened and passed, like a cloud shape changing. The knot loosened. The second knot, said the unweaver, is the knot of self. He picked up 2 stones and clacked them together. You hear a sound. Where does the sound exist? In the stone, in the air, in your ear, in your brain. It arises dependent on all these things. It has no independent soundness. He looked at her. The you that suffers is the same. It is a dependent arising of senses, thoughts, memories, culture. A temporary constellation, not a solid star. Look within. Find the solid, separate Elara. Can you find anything that is not a passing thought, a sensation, a perception? Elara looked. She searched for herself. She found thoughts about herself, feelings in herself, but no central, permanent thing that was the thinker or feeler. There was only the aware space in which these phenomena happened. It was terrifying and then utterly liberating. The second knot fell away. The third knot, he said, his voice now so quiet it was almost thought itself, is the subtlest. It is the knot of seeking itself, the desire to be unknotted, to be enlightened, to be at peace. This too is a thread. Drop it. There is nothing to achieve, because what you are, this aware, empty loom, is already and always present. It is the no thread. It is the silence before the first note of the universe. Rest there. And Elara did. She let go of trying to understand, to progress, to become an unweaver. She simply rested as the awareness that was hearing his words, feeling the moss, smelling the damp earth. In that surrender, a final, gentle unknotting occurred. She wasn't a weaver or an unweaver. She was the timeless, boundless capacity for all of it. When she returned to the veil of lingering echoes, she was different. She still wove, but from a place of deep stillness. Her tapestries were more potent than ever, for they were woven not from striving, but from emptiness. More importantly, her inner loom was quiet. The threads of thought would appear, but she no longer grabbed the shuttle. She watched them arise and pass, like patterns in a fire, leaving no trace on the silent, spacious loom of her mind. And when night fell, and she lay down to sleep, she practiced the ultimate unweaving. She would feel the body, a temporary tapestry of sensation, and let it be. She would hear the sounds of the night, watch the dream threads begin to form in the twilight of consciousness, and she would not follow them. Instead, she would sink back into the source from which they arose. The dark, silent, infinitely peaceful loom of no thread, the very ground of her being. In a land of red cliffs and whispering canyons, where the wind had carved temples from stone long before humans held chisels, there was a village known for its clay, It was not ordinary clay, but clay the color of the sky at dusk, a deep, whispering violet that held the light within it. And from this clay, the potters of the village shaped vessels of breathtaking grace. The greatest among them was an old woman named Sora. Her hands were maps of cracks and wisdom, and her bowls were so perfect, so flawlessly symmetrical and thin, they were said to ring with a celestial note when struck. Sora's secret was her wheel. It was spun, not by a foot pedal, but by a stream diverted through the village, its flow constant and serene. To watch her work was to see a dialogue between water, earth, and human intent. Yet, Sora carried a hidden weight. Her perfection was her prison. Each bowl she threw was a battle against the memory of the last. A hairline fracture in a fired piece felt like a crack in her soul. The praise of villagers felt like chains of expectation. She sought not to express beauty, but to imprison it in flawless form. And in doing so, she had squeezed all the joy from her craft. Her sleep was shallow, haunted by visions of spinning, collapsing forms, of clay that would not obey. One evening, after destroying a pot she deemed imperfect, a pot others had wept to see shattered, her young grandson, Kaito, spoke. His voice was quiet, like the first drop of rain on dust. "Obasan," he said, "why did you break it?" It held the sunset in its curve. Sora, her hands caked with damp clay, sighed. It was not true. It wobbled. Its truth was flawed. Kaito picked up a shard, holding it to the dying light. But see, the wobble made this edge catch the fire. It made it sing a different song. He pointed to the distant, jagged line of the Dragon Spine Mountains. The traders say that deep in those peaks, where the snow never melts, there is a hermit who uses no wheel. They say he finds his pots already made, sleeping in the riverbanks, and merely wakes them with his touch. They call him the listener to clay. A strange, quiet longing stirred in Sora's chest. It was the longing not for another technique, but for an end to the struggle. The next morning, she left her legendary wheel still. She walked away from the village of perfect bowls, carrying only a water gourd and a cloak. She followed the river that powered her wheel upstream, into the wild heart of the mountains. The journey was an ascent out of form. The tidy terraces gave way to raw scree and ancient silent forest. The constant hum of the potter's quarter was replaced by the immense, listening quiet of the heights. Here, her mind, accustomed to the critical commentary of creation, found nothing to grip. At first, it shrieked its opinions into the void, judging the jaggedness of a peak, finding fault with the asymmetry of a pine. But the mountains did not care. Slowly, starved of engagement, her inner critic grew quiet, leaving behind a vast and unfamiliar emptiness. After days of walking, she found the hermit. He was not sculpting or digging. He was sitting by a glacial-fed stream, his hands submerged in the icy water, his eyes closed. Around him, on the mossy bank, sat a dozen bowls, cups, and vessels, but they were unlike any she had ever seen. They were lumpen, asymmetrical. Some looked like captured river stones with hollows, others like frozen eddies of mud. They were not perfect, but they were utterly, completely themselves. Each one felt inevitable. Sora stood for a long time. Finally, the hermit, an old man with a face like weathered rootwood, opened his eyes. They were the pale, clear blue of glacial ice, and they held no welcome and no rejection, only a pure, objectless attention. "I have come from the village of the violet clay," Sora said, her voice small against the mountain silence. "I seek an end to the war with the form. I have heard you listen to the clay." The hermit, who gave no name, withdrew his hands from the water. He held them up, palms facing her, dripping. "There is no listener," he said, his voice the sound of gravel shifting underwater. "And no clay to listen to. There is only this." He gestured to the stream, the bowls, the sky, himself, and Sora in one encompassing sweep. He gave her no instruction. He simply moved aside, indicating the stream bank. Sora, perplexed, sat. The cold seeped through her clothes. She watched the water. She saw the way it parted around stones, how it carried silt, how it reflected the scudding clouds without clinging to any image. Hours passed, days. She felt a foolish urge to dig clay, to do something. But something in the hermit's profound inactivity held her. One afternoon, driven by a deep, wordless impulse, she reached into the stream bed. Her fingers found not a lump of pure clay, but a messy amalgam of silt, small stones, and organic matter. In her old life, she would have discarded it as impure. Now, she lifted it. It was cold and gritty. She carried it to a flat rock. Without a wheel, without a plan, she began to simply move her hands around the mass. She did not try to make a bowl. She tried to feel what was within it. She felt a harder stone core, and her fingers gently worked around it, letting it become the base. She felt a vein of sandier texture, and she allowed it to thin, becoming a natural, undulating rim. She was not creating. She was collaborating. She was uncovering the form that already lived, dormant in that particular handful of earth. It was slow. It was silent. It was the opposite of everything she knew. When she was done, she had not a bowl, but a thing. It was crude, heavy, its sides uneven. Yet, as she looked at it, a feeling arose in her that she had never felt after producing a masterpiece. A quiet, boundless peace. There was no gap between her intention and the result, because there had been no separate intention. There had only been a unified process of discovery. She showed it to the hermit. He looked at it for a long time, then at her. A faint smile touched his lips, like sunlight finding a deep crack in stone. "Good," he said. "You have stopped making. Now you have begun. This," he tapped the crude vessel, "is a cup for the sky. And this," he touched her forehead gently, "is the bowl that holds the world. They are the same." He began to speak then, in his slow, gravelly way. He spoke of the Dharma, not as scripture, but as the law of the mountain itself. "First, see impermanence," he said, pointing to the stream. "That water is never the same. Your form, your thoughts, your feelings, all are this stream. To grasp at any moment is to grasp at mist. Your suffering was your war against the stream's nature. Second, see no self," he said, picking up one of his own lumpen bowls. "Where does bowl begin and clay end? Is the hollow separate from the wall? Your Sora is like this, a temporary confluence of elements, earth of body, water of feeling, fire of passion, wind of breath, space of consciousness. You fought to make a perfect, permanent Sora bowl, but you are the clay, the wheel, the water, and the empty space within all at once. There is no solid potter to be found. Third, see suffering and its end," he said, gesturing to her hands, still stained with the muddy clay. "Your dukkha was the friction between your idea of a perfect bowl and the truth of the clay in your hands. The end of suffering is not a perfect bowl. It is the dropping of the idea. It is the willingness to let the clay be clay, and your awareness be the space that holds it without judgment." Sora stayed through the turning of the seasons. She made many crude, beautiful things. She learned to sit in meditation until the boundary between her own awareness and the sound of the wind dissolved. She learned that peace was not a quality of the object, the perfect pot, but the nature of the subject, the open, accepting awareness itself. When she returned to her village, she was different. Her hands were still wise, but her spirit was quiet. She sat at her famous wheel. She scented the violet clay. But now she did not fight it. She felt its resistance, its willingness, its song. She threw a bowl. It was, by her old standards, imperfect. It had a slight wave in its rim where the clay had a mind of its own. She fired it. It emerged from the kiln, and when she tapped it, it did not ring with a single high celestial note. It sang a softer, deeper, more complex chord, like the mountain stream over stones. The villagers were puzzled. Then they looked into the bowl. In its violet depths, in the play of light on its undulating surface, they didn't see perfection. They saw a piece of the evening sky, caught in a moment of gentle turbulence. They saw the truth of a thing that had been allowed to be itself. It was more beautiful than anything she had ever made. And Sora, at last, found rest. For now, when she lay down at night, she did not see spinning wheels and cracking pots. She felt her body as just such a vessel, imperfect, impermanent, a temporary gathering of elements. And within it, she knew herself not as the fragile clay, but as the infinite, silent space that the bowl existed to contain. The worries, the memories, the plans, they were just more clay, appearing and dissolving in the boundless awareness that was her true nature. She would let them be, let them go, and sink into the profound peace of the unmade. Our story begins in a city that was a living mosaic, a place of bustling canals and arched bridges, where the air hummed with commerce and the clatter of looms. This was the city of Astra, famed across the world for its luminous lanterns. But these were no ordinary lanterns. They were woven from strands of spun glass and infused with the light of rare glow moss, casting a light that was both soft and penetrating, that seemed to illuminate not just streets, but the very mood of a room. The greatest of all the lantern makers was an artisan named Leander. Leander's workshop was a cathedral of light and precision. His hands moved with a surgeon's grace, his eyes missing no flaw in a filament. He could calculate the exact tension needed for a lantern to hold its shape for a century. His creations hung in palaces and temples, their light considered a balm for the soul. Yet, within Leander's own soul, a profound and private darkness reigned. His mind was not illuminated by his craft, but shadowed by it. Every finished lantern was not a triumph, but a fossilized moment of anxiety captured in glass. He saw not the glow, but the microscopic bubble in the weave. He heard not the whispers of awe, but the imagined criticisms of connoisseurs. His inner world was a negative of his art, a dark, constricted space where fear of failure was the only constant light, a harsh and flickering one. Sleep was a foreign country. He could only glimpse from a great distance, through a fog of restless planning and regret. One evening, as he worked late on a commission for a newborn prince, a lantern meant to symbolize a life of untroubled joy. His hand trembled. A single crucial strand of glass snapped with a sound like a frozen sigh. The delicate structure sagged, imperfect, doomed. A wave of cold despair, far disproportionate to the event, washed over him. It felt like the breaking of something inside his own structure. At that moment, his old mentor, a man named Silas, who now swept the workshop floors, his own brilliant career long since dissolved into a serene obscurity, placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. "You are trying to weave light, Leander," Silas murmured, his voice like pages turning in a forgotten book. "But you are using the thread of shadow. You craft containers for illumination, yet your own mind is a locked box." Leander, his eyes burning with fatigue and frustration, did not shrug him off. "What alternative is there, old man? Without the fear of a mistake, there is no standard. Without the shadow, there is no shape to the light." Silas smiled, a network of wrinkles deepening around eyes that held a surprising, untroubled clarity. "They say that far to the east, beyond the salt flats, where the mountains pierce the ceiling of the world, there is a place with no name. The people there weave no cloth, shape no metal, blow no glass. They are weavers of attention itself. They tend the lanterns of the unborn, which are not made, but recognized. Their light comes from no moss, but from the source of seeing itself." A strange, hollow yearning opened in Leander's chest. It was not a desire for a new technique, but a desperate hunger for the very quality his lanterns were said to bestow upon others: inner peace. He abandoned his workshop, his reputation, the half-repaired prince's lantern. He took only a cloak and a waterskin, and walked away from the city of manufactured light. The journey was an arduous subtraction. The fertile plains gave way to the blinding, featureless expanse of the salt flats, a sea of white silence under a relentless sky. Here, there was nothing to make, nothing to fix, nothing to judge. His mind, deprived of its usual fodder, turned its critical gaze inward, dissecting his own motives, his weaknesses, with brutal precision. The inner cacophony became a scream in the void. He nearly turned back 100 times, but he pressed on, and after a crossing that felt less like travel and more like an erasure, he reached the foothills of the mountains, and then the mountains themselves. This was not the picturesque realm of stories. It was raw, elemental, immense. The air was thin. The sound was the wind's endless exhalation and the groan of ancient ice. And then, in a high valley suspended between peaks, he found the nameless place. There were no grand temples. There were simple stone shelters blending into the landscape. The people moved with a slow, deliberate grace, their faces neither joyful nor sad, but profoundly present. They did not greet him. They simply made space for him, as one makes space for a rock or a tree. In the center of the settlement burned a fire, but not of wood. It was a clear, steady flame rising from a natural fissure in the stone, a terrestrial star. An elder, a woman whose age was impossible to guess, sat beside it. She was not weaving, carving, or chanting. She was attending. Her gaze was resting on the flame with an intimacy that was neither worship nor analysis. Leander, coated in the grime and exhaustion of his journey, fell to his knees, not in reverence, but in sheer depletion. "I have come from the city of lanterns," he croaked. "I make light for the world, but I live in darkness. They say you know the light that needs no making." The elder, named Elara, turned her gaze from the flame to him. Her eyes held the same quality as the eternal fire, clear, steady, consuming nothing. "You have come a long way to discover what has never been lit and can never be extinguished," she said. Her voice was low, resonant, like stone settling. "Your darkness is not the absence of light. It is the presence of a story. The story of Leander, the maker, the critic, the seeker. That story casts a long shadow. We are not weavers of light here. We are discoverers of the space in which all stories, light and shadow, self and other, arise and cease. she gave him his first practice, which seemed like nothing at all. For the next cycle of the moon, you will sit here with this fire. Your only task is to notice when you have become lost in a story, the story of your past, your future, your unworthiness, your specialness. The moment you notice, simply say to yourself, "Ah, a story," and return your attention to the direct sensation of the moment, the heat on your skin, the smell of the air, the sound of the wind, not the idea of the heat, but the raw, wordless experience of it. It was agonizing. Leander sat. Within seconds, he was lost in an epic tale of his own folly. Ah, a story. He'd return to the heat. Then a thrilling drama of his future enlightenment would unfold. Ah, a story. The sound of the wind. Then a tragic opera of all his past mistakes. Ah, a story. The feeling of the hard stone. It was excruciatingly boring and intensely frustrating. He was a master artisan, and he was being asked to do the mental equivalent of watching paint dry. But slowly, something shifted. The spaces between the recognition, "Ah, a story," and the return to sensation began to widen. In those gaps, there was nothing. No Leander, no problem, no seeker, just sensation, aware of itself. A pure, simple isness. It was not blissful. It was prior to bliss and sorrow. It was peace, the peace of the mountain itself. Weeks turned into months. Elara gave him other non-tasks. To walk to a specific distant rock and back, with full attention on the movement of his body, the feel of the ground. When he arrived, he was to turn around and come back, with no goal, no achievement. He learned the profound discipline of futility. He learned to listen not to meanings but to sounds as pure vibration. He learned to feel the wind not as cold or biting, but as a kaleidoscope of pressure and temperature on his skin. One evening, as the eternal fire cast long shadows, he spoke of his craft. "In my lanterns," he said, "the light is trapped inside the weave. It is a prisoner of form." Elara nodded. "And your consciousness," she said, "has been a prisoner of the form you call Leander. The thoughts, the memories, the anxieties, they are the beautiful, intricate weave, but the light of awareness that shines through them, that is aware of them, that is free. It is the unborn, undying source. You have been looking at the weave and calling it the lantern. I am pointing you to the light itself, which has no shape, needs no container, and is currently reading these words as a pattern in its own boundless radiance. The understanding did not come as a flash, but as a dawn, slow, inevitable, illuminating everything from within." He saw that his suffering was his identification with the content of his experience, the flawed lantern, the critical thought, the anxious feeling, and his ignorance of the context, the aware space in which it all appeared. He was the screen, mistaking himself for the movie. When Leander finally returned to Astra, he was a different man. He went back to his workshop. The tools were the same. The glass was the same. But his relationship to them was utterly transformed. He no longer fought with the materials. He collaborated with their nature. A snapped thread was not a failure, but a new direction. The lanterns he began to produce were different. They were less perfect, but infinitely more alive. Their light seemed to emanate not just from the glow moss, but from the very acceptance and intelligence with which they were made. People said his lanterns didn't just light a room, they quieted the mind. And at night, when the great city grew quiet, Leander would lie in the dark. He would feel the tiredness in his body, hear the distant sounds of the canals, notice the parade of thoughts about the next day's work. But now, he did not fight them or follow them. He would simply recognize, with a gentle, inner smile. Ah, a story. And he would return his attention to the raw, peaceful fact of being, the sensation of breath, the darkness behind his eyelids, the silent, aware presence that was reading the story of his own experience. He would rest as that awareness, vast and untouched, and let the personal story of Leander dissolve into the dreamless peace of the unborn. Our story unfolds in a time where the line between dream and waking was thin. There was a city of white stone and blue tile, built on 1,000 bridges over silent canals. It was a city of music, of mathematicians who composed equations of stunning beauty, of astronomers who mapped the dance of celestial bodies with flawless precision. At its heart stood the Tower of Echoes, and in the tower hung the great bell, chrysanthemum. It was cast from an alloy of 7 sacred metals, and its voice was said to be the audible fingerprint of the cosmos. It rang only once a year, at the winter solstice, and its single, deep rolling note would reverberate through the city for a full hour, during which all speech ceased, all work halted. The people believed it cleared the spiritual slate, washed the collective mind clean. The keeper of the bell was a man named Aris. He was the 9th in a lineage of keepers, a man of immense discipline and profound melancholy. He knew the bell's history, its metallurgy, the exact force needed to make it sing without cracking. His entire life was a vigil in anticipation of that one perfect note. Yet, for the other 364 days of the year, Aris lived in a private hell of anticipatory anxiety. His mind was a prison of what-ifs. What if the striker is flawed? What if a hairline crack has formed in the metal? What if my stroke is off by a fraction and the note is flat, and I bring dishonor to my ancestors? He heard the perfect note constantly in his imagination, and it tormented him, for it made the silence of the bell tower sound like a screaming failure. He was the guardian of a symbol of peace who knew no peace. Sleep was impossible. His nights were spent listening to the phantom echoes of a bell that had not yet been struck, and the imagined criticisms of a city that revered him. One summer evening, as he polished the immense, silent dome of chrysanthemum for the 10,000th time, his daughter, a girl of 12 named Lyra, climbed the tower steps. She carried a small bowl of broth. She watched him, his movements tense and ritualistic. "Father," she said, her voice clear as the note he feared, "you care for the bell so it may sing one note. But who cares for the silence so it may hold the note?" Aris paused, his cloth suspended. The question was like a key turning in a lock he didn't know was there. The silence is just emptiness. It is nothing. The bell is everything. Lyra shook her head. When you drop a stone in a pond, the ripples are beautiful. But where do they go? They don't vanish. They become part of the water's memory. They become the silence of the pond again. Isn't the bell's note just a beautiful ripple in the silence? And isn't the silence before and after the same silence? She placed the broth beside him. The traveling monks from the north say that beyond the glass desert, where the sand sings and the stars touch the ground, there is a valley with no name. They have no bell. They say they have become the silence that hears all sounds. They are called the listeners. That night, Aris did not dream of the bell. He dreamed of an endless crystalline silence, a listening so deep it had no listener. The longing it awoke in him was a physical ache, a homesickness for a home he had never known. He made a decision that broke his lineage and shattered his identity. He left the key to the bell tower with Lyra. He walked out of the city of echoes and into the vast, singing emptiness of the glass desert. The desert was a crucible. The sun was a hammer, the wind a file, scouring away all that was non-essential. His fine keeper's robes turned to rags. His knowledge of metallurgy was useless. His pride was sandblasted away. Here, there was nothing to anticipate, because the landscape was unchanging in its stark, minimalist beauty. His mind, deprived of its familiar anxiety, at first invented new ones: thirst, mirages, scorpions. But the desert was too big for such small stories. Slowly, his internal narrative began to starve. He walked for weeks, guided only by the stars and a pull in his heart. He became a skeleton of a man, moving through a skeleton of a world. When he finally stumbled into the valley, he thought he was hallucinating. It was green, impossibly so, fed by underground springs, and it was utterly, profoundly silent. Not the dead silence of a tomb, but the vibrant, pregnant silence of a held breath. There were simple dwellings woven from living willow. The people moved through them with a fluid, effortless grace. They did not speak. They communicated with glances, with subtle gestures that seemed part of the wind's language. Their eyes were the most striking feature. They held a depth of receptivity, as if they were not looking at things, but allowing things to be seen through them. He was found not by a leader, but by the community's attention. They tended to his physical needs without fuss. When he was strong enough, an elder named Kyle, a man whose face was a map of gentle acceptance, simply sat with him. Aris, his voice rusty from disuse, spilled out his pain, his life of waiting for a single moment of perfection, his enslavement to an ideal, the constant roar of anticipation in what should have been stillness. Kyle listened. He listened not just to the words, but to the spaces between them, to the fear in Aris's breath, the tension in his hands. When Aris finished exhausted, Kyle simply pointed to a stream that bubbled from a mossy rock. He gestured for Aris to listen. Aris listened. He heard the water. "I hear the stream," he said. Kyle shook his head. He pointed again, more insistently. Aris listened harder. "I hear the water over stones, a high trickle and a lower gurgle." Kyle smiled gently and shook his head again. He made a gesture, like opening his hands and letting something fall away. Frustrated, Aris closed his eyes. He stopped trying to name what he heard. He just allowed the sound to wash over him. He felt it as vibration in his chest, as a pattern of coolness in the air. And then he heard it. Or rather, he felt it. Beneath the sound of the water was the silence. But it wasn't an absence. It was a presence. It was the ground of being from which the sound arose. The water's chatter was a shape this silence was taking. When he opened his eyes, Cal was nodding. His instruction began. It was not an instruction in doing, but in undoing. For now, Cal conveyed through gesture and a few sparse words. Just sit. When a thought of the bell arises, do not follow it. Do not fight it. Simply notice, thinking. Feel the energy of that thought in the body. Where is it? The chest, the head. Feel it as pure sensation, not as my anxiety. Then return to the direct sound of the stream, not the idea of the stream, the raw experience. It was the hardest work Aris had ever done. His mind was a bell tower, and thoughts were bells clanging constantly. Thinking, feeling tightness in throat, returning to sound, thinking, feeling heat in face, returning to sound, thinking, feeling a hollow ache, returning to sound. But gradually, the space between thinking and returning to sound grew wider. In those gaps, there was no Aris. There was just listening, a pure, objectless awareness. The I that was worried was seen to be just another sound in the mind stream, another ripple in the silence. He began to experience moments where the listener and the sound merged. He wasn't Aris hearing water. There was just the hearing, a boundless, peaceful intimacy. Kyle taught him the practices of the listeners. Walking meditation, where each footfall was a kiss to the earth, complete in itself. Eating meditation, where a single raisin was a universe of texture, taste, and transformation. You have spent your life waiting for one perfect note, Kale told him one day. But every moment is that note. The sound of a leaf falling, the crackle of the fire, the beat of your own heart. They are all chrysanthemum ringing. Your suffering was in choosing one note and rejecting all others. True listening has no preference. The final understanding came on a night of breathtaking stillness. Kyle took him to a high meadow. Tonight, you will not listen to sounds, he said. You will listen to the source of listening itself. Aris sat. He let go of listening for anything. He dropped even the anchor of his breath. He simply rested as awareness itself. Thoughts came like distant clouds, with no one to claim them. Sensations arose and fell in the vast, empty space of his being. And then it happened. A falling star streaked across the sky. In that instant, there was no Aris seeing a star. There was just the seeing, a luminous, silent knowing that was inseparable from the star's fiery passage. The boundary between inner and outer dissolved. He was the silent valley, the star, the cold air, the aware emptiness that contained it all. He was the silence that hears. He had found the bell that was never cast and could never crack. When Aris returned to the city of white stone, the winter solstice was approaching. Lyra, now a young woman, greeted him with eyes that held no surprise, only a deep knowing. The city was abuzz with anticipation for Chrysanthemum's ring. Aris ascended the tower, not with anxiety, but with a serene gravity. The crowd gathered in the square below, hushed. He stood before the great bell, not as its keeper, but as its brother. He was not separate from it. He lifted the striker, not with force, but with a tender, precise allowance. He struck. The note poured forth, deep, complex, golden. It vibrated in the stones, in the bones of the city, in the hearts of the people. But Ares did not hear it as he once had. He heard it as the silence, singing a temporary, beautiful song of itself. He heard the note, and he heard the infinite silence from which it was born and to which it would return. He felt no pride, no relief, only a boundless, compassionate peace. He had not perfected the note. He had awakened to the context that made all notes possible and irrelevant. That night, and every night after, Oris slept the sleep of the deep listener. Lying in the dark, he would feel the world not as something outside himself, but as a pattern of sensation appearing within the boundless, silent awareness he knew himself to be. A thought about tomorrow, a ripple in the silence, a memory, another ripple. He would greet each one with gentle recognition and let it dissolve back into the vast, quiet ocean of his true nature. He rested not as a man who had found silence, but as the silence itself, dreaming briefly of being a man. In a land of whispering libraries and towers of scrolls, there was a city carved from living chalk. It was called Calum, the city of questions. Its citizens were not farmers or warriors, but scholars, philosophers, and archivists. Their greatest treasure was the Grand Athenaeum, a labyrinthine library said to contain a copy of every true statement ever uttered. Its keeper was a man named Silas. Silas was a cartographer of knowledge. His mind was a flawless indexing system. He could recite lineages of kings, philosophical arguments, and scientific theorems with terrifying precision. He knew where every book was, the weight of every truth. Yet Silas was the most haunted man in Calem. His mind was not a serene library, but a prison of echoing corridors. Every new fact he ingested became a stone in a towering, precarious wall of knowing. Each whispered debate in the stacks felt like a tremor threatening its collapse. He sought certainty as a drowning man seeks air, yet every answer he found only spawned 10 more desperate questions. Sleep was a foreign language. In the dark, his mind's eye would project vast, shifting equations on the ceiling, arguments without conclusion, a deafening cacophony of knowing that offered no understanding. He was drowning in a sea of answers, dying of thirst for a single drop of peace. One evening, during a fierce storm that rattled the leaded library windows, a traveling binder sought shelter. She was an old woman, her hands stained with dark ink and something that looked like tree sap. She carried no books, only a roll of blank, creamy vellum. Silas, ever the host, offered her a corner by the fire. As she warmed her hands, she gazed at the miles of groaning shelves. "You have collected all the words," she said, her voice the sound of dry leaves rubbing together. "But where do you keep the spaces between them?" Silas, irritated by what he perceived as poetic nonsense, replied curtly, "The spaces are nothing. Margin, absence, the words are everything." The binder smiled, a network of cracks appearing around her eyes. "When you listen to a great piece of music," she said softly, "is it the notes that move you, or the silence that allows them to be heard? You have spent your life collecting notes, Meister Silas, and have forgotten the page upon which they are written. Your mind is so full of ink, it can no longer see the paper." She pointed a gnarled finger eastward, beyond the chalk cliffs. "Where the world grows soft and the maps say, 'Here be monsters,' there is a valley without a name. The people there keep no books. They are scribes of the unwritten. They tend the library of the first thought, which is empty. They remember what was known before the first word was ever spoken." A silence fell, not of emptiness, but of profound resonance. Her words had not entered Silas's mind through the gate of logic. They had slipped underneath it, into a place he had long forgotten. The longing that awoke was not for more knowledge, but for the end of knowing. It was a homesickness for a simplicity before complexity. He left the next morning. He abandoned his keys, his titles, his labyrinth. He walked away from the realm of the written word and into the realm of pure experience. He crossed the chalk plains, where the wind erased his footprints as soon as he made them. He entered the whisper wood, where the trees spoke in sighs and the light fell in dappled, wordless paragraphs. The forest was an antidote to the library. Here, nothing was catalogued. A mushroom was not a specimen. It was a sudden, damp miracle. A bird's call was not a signifier. It was a stitch in the fabric of the morning. His analytical mind, deprived of its fodder, thrashed like a beached fish. It tried to name, categorize, compare, but the forest was too present, too utterly itself. Slowly, starved of interpretation, his thinking began to still. He simply walked. He felt the give of moss underfoot. He smelled the green scent of decay and growth. He heard the silence between the bird calls and found it was not empty, but thick and sweet as honey. After many days, he found the valley. There were no buildings, only a circle of great smooth stones around a spring of water so clear it seemed to be made of light. The people were few. They moved with a quiet grace. They did not speak. When they communicated, it was with a look, a touch, a shared attention on a flower or the flight of a hawk. They were led by an elder known only as the page. She was a woman of immense stillness. When she looked at you, it felt not like being seen, but like being allowed to be. Silas, his scholar's robes in tatters, his mind raw from its unlearning, stood before her. He tried to summon his eloquence, to phrase his desperate quest as a scholarly inquiry. No words came. He simply fell to his knees, a silent admission of defeat. The page placed a hand on his head, a gesture of infinite compassion. She then led him to the spring, handed him a dry gourd, and gestured for him to dip it and drink. It was his first instruction. Drink. He did. The water was cold and alive. It carried the taste of stone and sky. For a moment, there was no Silas, no library, no question, just the shocking, vivid reality of cold water on a parched tongue. It was the first truth he had ever experienced instead of knowing. His training began. It was the systematic dismantling of the knower. First, he was given the practice of just this. He would sit for hours with a single, ordinary stone. His task was not to analyze its mineral composition, its age, its origin. His task was to see it as if he had never seen a stone before. To see its color without the word grey. To feel its texture without the concept rough. To know it directly before thought intervened. It was agonizingly difficult. His mind was a relentless commentator. Just this, he would whisper inwardly, as his mind said granite, igneous, volcanic, old. He practiced for weeks, and then, one sunset, as the light bled across the stone, it happened. The labels fell away. There was only the suchness of the thing, a profound, wordless intimacy. He wept. He had met the world without the intermediary of his own thoughts. Second, he was taught the listening that has no listener. The page would sit with him by the spring. Listen to the water, she conveyed through gesture. He would listen, identifying the trickle, the splash. She would shake her head. She placed his hand on his own chest, over his heart. Listen from here. He tried. He failed. Then, one day, in a state of exhausted surrender, he stopped trying to listen to something. He simply became listening itself. The sound of the water didn't come to him. It arose within the spacious awareness he was. The listener and the sound merged. There was only the singing of the world. He had discovered the source of all hearing, the silent awareness prior to the ear. Finally came the unwriting. The page gave him a blank piece of vellum and a stick of charcoal. Write the truest thing you know, she instructed. Silas, the master of truths, froze. He thought of equations, philosophical maxims, historical facts. None felt true in the way the water tasted true. Hours passed. Finally, in a flash of frustration and insight, he made a single, dark, sweeping mark across the page, a chaotic, meaningless smear. He showed it to her, ashamed. She looked at it, then at him, and her face lit with the first full smile he had seen. She took the charcoal and, with a few gentle strokes, turned his chaotic smear into the graceful, swooping wing of a bird in flight. The first truth is the blank page, she whispered, her first direct words to him. The second truth is the impulse. The third truth is that all forms, the chaotic smear, the graceful bird, are equally empty, equally full of the intelligence of the page. Your mind, Silas, is the page. Your thoughts, your vast knowledge, are just smears and birds. They are not you. You are the untouched vellum, the silent awareness upon which the entire story is written and erased and written again. The final knot in his heart unraveled. He saw it. He wasn't the librarian of his experience. He was the library itself, the boundless, empty, silent space that contained all the books, all the stories, all the arguments, and remained utterly unchanged by them. His suffering was his identification with the frantic scribblings, his belief that he was the ink. Silas returned to Caelum a different man. He walked back into the Grand Athenaeum. The scholars buzzed around him, demanding to know where he had been, what he had learned. He said nothing. He went to his old desk, piled high with unanswered queries. He did not open a single scroll. Instead, he began to walk the aisles. He would run his fingers along the spines of the books, not to recall their contents, but to feel the leather, the gold leaf, the dust. He would sit by a window and watch the play of light on the marble floor. He had not forgotten his knowledge. He had simply seen through it. It was all a beautiful, elaborate story appearing in the awareness that was his true self. The pressing need to know, to be certain, had vanished. In its place was a vast, peaceful, compassionate curiosity. And when night fell in the silent library, sleep came to him not as an escape from thought, but as a homecoming to the source of thought. He would lie in the dark, feel the weight of his body, and watch the after-images of the day's words dance across the screen of his mind. He would greet them. Ah, a memory of an argument. Ah, a line of poetry. And he would let them go, not by force, but by seeing them for what they were. Dream stuff, rising and falling in the boundless, silent, empty awareness that was his true nature. He was no longer the keeper of books. He was the unwritten page upon which the dream of the world was gently inscribed, and from which it was gently erased, moment by peaceful moment. In a kingdom woven from river mist and willow branches, there was a city that moved. It was the floating city of Lys, a constellation of elegant houseboats, graceful skiffs, and moss-draped pontoons, tethered to the heart of the great, slow river Selin. The lifeblood of Lys was not gold or grain, but memory. The people were mnemonis, master rememberers. They could recite the genealogies of every family back 20 generations. They could recall the exact weather on a specific day, a century past, the price of spices in a forgotten market, the nuance of a look exchanged between lovers, long turned to dust. Their identity was their unbroken chain of yesterdays. The archivist of Lys was a woman named Alara. Her mind was a perfect humming vault. She could close her eyes and walk through the mental replica of the city on any day in its history, noting the colour of a particular boat's awning, the tune a minstrel played on a certain bridge. She was the living anchor of the city's soul. Yet, Alara was drowning. Her perfect memory was a gilded cage. Every present moment was instantly compared, judged, and filed away against a million past moments. A beautiful sunset was not experienced. It was catalogued as inferior to the sunset of autumn's end year 42. Her child's laughter was not felt. It was stored as reminiscent of her sister's laugh, but slightly higher in pitch. The present was a thin, unsatisfying ghost, haunted by the vivid, crowding phantoms of the past. Sleep offered no escape. Her dreams were chaotic, hyper-real replays of archived days, a frantic, endless indexing of a life she was too busy remembering to actually live. One evening, as she stood on the central pontoon, watching the water refuse to hold the image of the twilight sky, her young son, Finn, tugged her sleeve. He was pointing not at the spectacular clouds, but at the water striders, skating on the river's skin. "Mama," he whispered. his voice a secret shared with the dusk. The bug doesn't remember the last place it stepped. It just steps. Isn't that brave? His words slipped past her defenses like a fish through a net. They swam into a silent, untouched pool within her. That night, the river's song outside her window seemed to change. It no longer whispered of the mountains it had left behind, but sang only of its journey here, now, over these specific stones. She thought of the oldest, vaguest legend, that the river Selin did not begin in the mountains, but in a place called the Still Point, a lake so deep and calm it was said to reflect not the sky, but the true nature of the observer. And on its shores lived those who had forgotten how to remember, so they could finally know. Elara made a choice that felt like both treason and the only possible truth. She left her ledgers, her titles, her duty. She stepped into a simple skiff, untethered it, and let the current take her downstream, away from the city of memory, toward the mythic source. The journey was an unspooling. The familiar, manicured riverbanks of lies gave way to wild marshes, then to deep, forested gorges. The sounds of remembered music and gossip were replaced by the raw chorus of frogs and wind. Her mind, the great archive, revolted. It projected vivid, intrusive memories onto the unfamiliar landscape, trying to tame it. This bend is like the one where grandfather fished. This rock resembles the profile of the third archivist. It was exhausting. She tried to silence it, to not remember, which was just another form of remembering. She wept with frustration. Then, one afternoon, a storm blew in. The sky bruised. The wind tore at her. The river became a raging beast. She fought the current, muscles screaming, memory useless. Her skiff was dashed against a snag, splintering. She was thrown into the cold, chaotic water. For a terrifying, eternal minute, there was no past, no future. There was only the brutal, immediate now of fight, of cold, of breath snatched from roaring air. She washed up, battered and gasping, on a sandy bank. When she came to, she was in a simple hut. A fire crackled. An old man with skin like river-worn leather was warming a broth. He said nothing. He helped her sip. His eyes were the color of the deep river pools, and they held a stillness so complete it seemed to slow her frantic heartbeat just by looking into them. This was Kale, the guardian of the Still Point. Days passed as she healed. She tried to explain herself, her quest, the oppressive weight of her memory. Kyle listened, his gaze resting on her face as one might gaze at a familiar, turbulent stretch of river. When she finished, he simply said, "You have confused the map for the territory. You carry the river in a bottle and call it the river. Come." He led her not to a library or a shrine, but to the shore of the Still Point. It was not a lake, but an expanse of water so profoundly calm, it was impossible to tell where water ended and sky began. The world doubled, then dissolved into unity. "Your first practice," Cal said, his voice softer than the lap of tiny waves. "Watch the water. When a memory arises of the storm, of your city, of your son, do not follow it into the story. Simply note, memory. Then return to the visual fact of the water. Not the idea of water, the shimmer, the play of light, the specific, wordless suchness of it." It was agony. Her mind was a riot of remembrance. Memory of Finn's birth. Return to shimmer. Memory of a failed festival. Return to light on water. Memory of a forgotten promise. Return to blue. She was a puppet, and her past held all the strings. But Carl was endlessly patient. He taught her the second practice, feeling the body. When a painful memory arose, would stop her. Where do you feel it? Not in the story, but in the flesh. A tightness in the chest. A clenching in the gut. Feel that sensation directly. Breathe into it. She looked at her own hands, wrinkled by the river and fire, and saw them not as her hands, but as expressions of the same intelligent life that shaped the clouds and the river stones. The Elara she had so meticulously documented was just a particularly complex ripple on the surface of the still point. The relief was oceanic. She had spent a lifetime building a dam of identity against the river of time, and now she had discovered she was the river, eternally flowing, eternally now. When she finally returned to Lies, she was a stranger, and yet more herself than ever. The people rushed to her, demanding news, asking her to settle historical disputes. She listened. She smiled. When pressed for a specific date or detail, she would sometimes give it, but without the old weight of certainty. More often, she would say, "I don't recall," and her smile would hold a peace so deep it silenced further questions. She no longer lived in the archive. She would sit on the deck of her houseboat with Finn, not remembering past moments, but making new ones. Moments so vivid and uncompared they felt like the first moments of creation. She listened to the river Selen's song, and heard in it not an echo of the past, but the eternal joyful sound of flowing in the present. And at night, sleep was no longer a battleground with ghosts. Lying in the dark, she would feel the gentle rock of the boat. She would notice a memory arise, a scent, a face, a regret. Instead of following it down its dark alley, she would feel it as a sensation, acknowledge it as a passing ripple in the still point of her awareness, and let it go. She would sink beneath the surface of thought, into the deep, quiet, boundless water of pure being, the source that had never known a yesterday and would never fear a tomorrow. In the high, crystalline city of Kronos, nestled between peaks that pierced the sky like stone hourglasses, life was a symphony of precision. The city was governed not by kings, but by the great gearwork, a celestial clock of such complexity it was said to mirror the motion of the stars themselves. Its heart was the chamber of ticking, where the master clockmaker, an elderly man named Elias, lived. Elias was a priest of rhythm. His ears were tuned to the subtlest discord in 1,000 interlocking gears. His life's work was the pursuit of perfect, frictionless time. Yet, Elias was a man haunted by tempo. His mind was not a peaceful chamber, but a relentless metronome. Every conversation was measured for length, every walk timed for efficiency. Joy was an inefficient use of seconds. Grief, a stuck gear to be hastily repaired. The future was a terrifying cascade of potential malfunctions. The past, a museum of missed ticks. Sleep, in a city that never slept, was his greatest failure, a surrender to the chaotic, unmeasured void. In the dark, he would lie counting not sheep, but the phantom ticks of clocks that weren't there, his heart a frantic, irregular drum against the silence he feared most. One still afternoon, a hairline fracture, invisible to any eye but his, appeared in the mainspring of the great gearwork. The city's rhythm faltered just once. A single profound click was out of place. To the citizens, it was nothing. To Elias, it was the sound of the universe cracking. A cold terror, deeper than any professional failure, seized him. It was the terror of meaninglessness, of entropy winning. That evening, his granddaughter, Lyra, found him staring at the faulty spring, his face ashen. She was a child of silent places, who preferred watching clouds to watching clocks. She took his hand, calloused from tools in her small, smooth one. "Grandfather," she whispered, her voice like wind over a still pond. "The clock measures the shadows, but who measures the light between them?" Elias looked at her, truly looked, past the gears reflected in his eyes. Her question did not compute. It was a syntax error in the language of his life, but it echoed in a hollow place within him he'd long since bricked over. She pointed to the western peaks, where the sun bled its last light. "The travelers who bring the singing stones. They say that beyond the peaks of perpetual dawn, where day and night are the same, there is a valley without a name. They have no clocks. They say they live in the eternal now, and that their only artifact is the bell that never rings." A longing, ancient and wordless, awoke. It was not a desire to fix time, but to be free of it, to step out of the ticking and into the talk. He left his tools, his blueprints, his sacred duty. He walked out of the city of measured breaths and into the thin, unmarked air of the high passes. The journey was a dismantling of sequence. The switchback trails made no linear sense. Day blurred into night as he climbed above the clouds. His mind, the great timekeeper, broke. Without schedules, it tried to impose order on the stars, to count his heartbeats, to calculate the rate of his beard's growth. It was a clock thrown into the sea, its gears screaming against the watery silence. He became disoriented, lost not in space, but in the very concept of progress. He was a sentence without punctuation. He was found, not by a person, but by the silence itself. It was a physical presence in a high meadow, a blanket of quiet so thick it muffled his thoughts. In the center of the meadow stood a simple stone plinth. On it rested a bronze bell, green with age, its clapper still. An old woman sat beside it, weaving a basket from grass. She did not look up as he approached. Her name, he would learn, was Anya, the keeper of the unstruck bell. Elias, his voice raspy from disuse and altitude, spilled his confession. His life of ticking, his terror of the silent crack, his enslavement to the next second. Anya listened while her fingers flew. When he finished, she held up her basket. "Is it the grass that is the basket?" she asked, "or the space between the strands?" Elias, the technician, frowned. "Both are necessary. The structure requires both material and void." "Exactly," she said, her eyes finally meeting his. They were the color of the summer sky at noon, depthless and calm. "You have spent your life obsessed with the grass, the ticking, the gears, the seconds. You have called the spaces between silence or waste or crack, but the basket cannot hold anything without the space. Your life cannot hold meaning without the stillness between the ticks. Your fear is not of time stopping, but of encountering the space that is your true nature." She gave him his first practice. "Sit by the bell. Your task is to notice the moment when a thought about the past or future arises. Not the thought itself, but the instant of its birth. Catch the very first tick of it. Then, instead of following it, turn your attention to the sensation in your body just before the thought, to the raw, silent awareness that is always here, before time splits into then and when." It was maddening. He was a master of observing effects, not causes. He'd spend hours chasing the tail of a thought about a missed lunch, trying to find its origin. He felt like a man trying to see his own eyeball. But Anya was patient. She taught him the second practice, the body as a sundial. She had him lie on the grass. Feel the sun move across your skin. Do not think morning becomes afternoon. Feel warmth on the left cheek. Then, later, warmth on the right. There is no story of time, only a direct, wordless experience of change. You are not a clock measuring the sun. You are the earth, receiving it. Weeks passed. Seasons seemed to condense and expand without logic. Slowly, something in his perception softened. He began to catch, not the thought, but the tiny pause, the fertile void from which it sprang. He felt the boundless awareness that was present whether a thought of yesterday or tomorrow flickered through it. He was discovering the bell that never rings, the silent, aware ground of his own being. One evening, as the stars emerged like frost on black glass, Anya spoke the core truth. "Elias," she said, "you believe you are inside time, like a fish in a river. You are not. Time is inside you, like a river in a fish's dream." The you that is aware, the consciousness reading these words, was never born onto the timeline. It does not age. It does not move from past to future. Past and future are thoughts appearing now in this timeless awareness. You are the dreamer, not the dream. You are the space in which the clock ticks, not the hand moving. It was as if the central gear of his universe, around which all others turned, simply vanished. The tension of being a separate self, racing along a timeline toward death, dissolved. He wasn't a clockmaker in time. He was the timeless awareness temporarily wearing the costume of Elias. A profound, unshakable peace settled in its place. It was the peace of the unstruck bell, complete, whole, containing all potential sound within its silent form. When Elias returned to Kronos, the great gearwork was still ticking. The hairline crack was still there. He walked into the chamber of ticking. The sound, once a symphony of meaning, now sounded like what it was, the charming, intricate noise of a machine. He did not rush to fix the spring. He sat down. He listened to the ticks, and for the first time, he heard the silence between them. And he found that silence to be vaster, more real, more truly him than all the noise combined. He became a different kind of keeper. He would still make repairs, but without urgency. He often seemed to be listening to something else. People would find him smiling at a single suspended gear, as if beholding a miracle. When asked about the crack in the spring, he would say, "It is a window." And at night, in the heart of the ticking city, Elias found a sleep deeper than any he had known. He would lie in the dark, feel the vibrations of the city clock through stone, and he would not count them. He would feel them as sensations dancing on the surface of the timeless, silent awareness he knew himself to be. The anxiety of the next day was just a thought bubble, rising and popping in the ocean of now. He would let go of the riverbank of past and future and float effortlessly in the eternal present, cradled by the bell that never rings, which was his own quiet heart. In the city of Iridia, built upon a volcanic plateau where the earth's breath was always warm, there lived a guild of glassblowers. Theirs was not the craft of windows or trinkets, but of capturing the invisible. They shaped lenses that could see the heat rising from a sparrow's breast, prisms that could fracture a single candle flame into 100 cold, rational colors, and delicate spheres said to hold a perfect vacuum, a tiny pocket of absolute nothingness suspended in glass. The master of this guild was a woman named Cora. Cora's hands were extensions of her will. She could coax molten silica into forms of heartbreaking fragility and strength. Her greatest obsession was purity. A single bubble, a fleck of ash, a subtle asymmetry. These were not flaws, but personal failures. She sought to create the perfect vessel, one that would contain the absolute void, the etheric null, as the philosophers called it. She believed that within this perfect nothingness lay the secret to true peace, a silence more profound than the absence of sound. Yet, Cora's inner world was a storm of impurities. Her mind was a furnace of judgment, constantly comparing the present moment to an idealized, impossible future. Every interaction was weighed for its flaw. Every feeling was an unwanted bubble in the glass of her composure. Her sleep was a fragile, thin shell, easily shattered by the internal noise of her own critical commentary. She was a creator of pristine emptiness who lived in a state of cluttered, noisy fullness. One evening, working on a magnum opus, a vast, teardrop-shaped vacuum chamber meant to be the ultimate expression of null, she witnessed the unthinkable. As she sealed the final hair-thin neck of glass, a microscopic impurity, a speck of carbon no larger than a thought, vaporized in the intense heat. It released a minuscule puff of gas into her perfect vacuum. The chamber was compromised. It was no longer pure. To anyone else, it was still a miracle of craftsmanship. To Cora, it was a universe of failure made solid. She did not shatter it in rage. She simply stared, feeling a corresponding crack propagate through her own spirit. At that moment, her apprentice, a quiet boy named Leo, who preferred watching dust motes dance in sunbeams to studying thermodynamics, spoke. "Master Cora," he murmured, his voice barely disturbing the air. "The floor, it makes a star." She looked. He was right. The tiny gas bubble, trapped in the thick glass of the base, caught the light from her furnace. It refracted it into a perfect, brilliant six-pointed star, a tiny, trapped constellation gleaming with fierce, unexpected beauty. "The old travelers from the Silica Desert," Leo continued, his eyes on the star, not her face. "They say that in the heart of the dunes, where the sand is so fine it becomes like liquid light, there are people who blow no glass. They are called the menders of broken light. They say they don't shape vessels. They become the space inside." That night, the furnace of her mind finally consumed its last fuel. A cold, clear emptiness remained, not the pure, conceptual void she sought, but a simple, exhausted openness. She left her tools cooling in the workshop. She walked out of the city of forms and into the formless sea of the Silica Desert. The desert was an unmaking. The sharp edges of Viridia's glass towers were replaced by the endless, sinuous curves of dunes. The constant roar of the furnaces was replaced by the hiss of sliding sand. Here, there was nothing to perfect. The wind perfected the dune's shape every second, only to undo it the next. Her analytical mind, starved of problems to solve, turned on itself, trying to find the perfect way to walk, the optimal pace of breath. It was a final, futile act of a dying tyrant. She walked until her body gave out, collapsing in the lee of a vast dune. She expected to die. Instead, she was found by a child, a girl whose skin was the color of the sand and whose eyes held no reflection, only a deep, absorbing darkness, as if she saw with the back of her skull. The girl gave her water from a porous clay vessel that sweated coolness. She led Cora, without a word, to a settlement of simple tents that seemed to grow from the desert floor. The people moved with a fluid, silent economy. They did not blow glass. They worked with sand, not to fuse it, but to sift it, to feel its flow. Their leader was an ancient, genderless person, known only as the sifter. Their face was a landscape of wrinkles, each one seeming to trace the path of a long, vanished grain of sand. Cora, her voice cracked like dry clay, tried to explain her quest for the perfect void, her failure, the imprisoning star. The sifter listened, their head tilted, as if hearing a distant, interesting wind. When Cora finished, they took a handful of the finest, whitest sand and let it trickle from their fist in a smooth, unbroken stream. "You seek the empty vessel," the sifter said, their voice like sand whispering on sand. "But you are confused about what it is empty of. You wish to empty it of content, of bubbles, of flaws, of self. But a vessel's purpose is not emptiness. Its purpose is potential. It is empty for something. The space inside a bowl is what holds the rice. The silence between notes is what holds the music. You have been trying to create a bowl that holds no thing, when you yourself are the space that holds everything." They gave her the first practice. She was to sit with a simple, flawed, everyday bowl, one with a chip, a crack, a rough spot. "Do not look at the clay," the sifter instructed. "Look at the space inside it, not as an idea, but as a reality. Feel its volume, its coolness, its readiness. Now, close your eyes and feel the same space inside your own head. The container of your thoughts. Is it any different?" It felt absurd, but she tried. She stared into the empty bowl until her eyes lost focus and the solid clay seemed to dematerialize, leaving only a sphere of possibility. She then turned her attention inward to the dark, silent space behind her eyes. At first, it was filled with the after images of the bowl, with thoughts about the practice. But as she persisted, a recognition dawned. The space of her awareness and the space in the bowl were not two different kinds of space. They were the same boundless openness, merely appearing to be divided by the illusion of a boundary called my head and the bowl. The crack in the bowl was like a thought in her mind, a pattern appearing within the space, not affecting the space itself. The sifter taught her the second, deeper practice, mending broken light. They would take a piece of common, greenish glass from the desert, a shard from some ancient, forgotten bottle, full of bubbles and imperfections. They would hold it up to the setting sun. "Do not see the flaw," they would say. "See how the light dances with the flaw. The bubble does not break the light. It gives it a new shape to play in. Your guilt, your anxiety, your critical thought, these are the bubbles in the glass of your present moment. Can you let the light of your awareness shine through them, making patterns without needing to fix the glass?" Cora practiced for moons. She learned to sit with intense discomfort, heat, thirst, a sharp memory, and instead of fighting it, trying to remelt the glass, she would breathe into it, allowing her awareness to surround it, to be the space that held it. The flaw would then often transform, not vanishing, but losing its solid, threatening quality, becoming just another interesting formation in the landscape of her experience. One evening, as the desert sky turned the color of a cooling crucible, the sifter offered the final teaching. They pointed to Cora's own chest. "You have been the glass blower, trying to shape yourself into a perfect thing. You must become the glass itself, not the fragile form, but the essential nature, transparent, receptive, capable of holding any shape without being permanently changed. And more than that, you must recognize you are the light that passes through the glass. And even more than that, you are the space in which the glass, the light, and the world they illuminate all arise. You are not the vessel. You are the room in which the vessel sits." The understanding was a shattering that felt like becoming whole. The central knot of Cora, the controller, the perfectionist, unraveled. She saw that the pristine vacuum she sought was not a state to be achieved out there in an object, but the very nature of her own awareness in here. always already empty of any permanent thing, yet infinitely capable of reflecting the temporary, flawed, and breathtakingly beautiful world. When Cora returned to Viridia, she did not go straight to her workshop. She walked to the public square, where her flawed masterpiece, the teardrop with the star, was now displayed as a curiosity. People gathered as she stood before it. They expected a lecture on failure. Instead, she simply pointed to the tiny gleaming star within. "For my entire life," she said, her voice clear and calm, "I sought to remove all such stars. I called them flaws. I see now they were not flaws in the glass. They were my own blindness, refusing to see that the light needs the flaw to become a star. This," she touched her own heart, "is not a vessel to be perfected. It is a space to be inhabited. And every thought, every feeling, even the painful ones, are just dust motes in the sunbeam of awareness, making the light visible." She returned to her craft, but everything had changed. She still made exquisite glass, but now she sometimes deliberately included a bubble, a swirl of ash, to catch the light. Her pieces were no longer about the purity of emptiness, but about the joyful, imperfect dance of form and space. They felt alive, they felt peaceful, and at night, when the last furnace was banked, Cora found a sleep of profound depth. Lying in the dark, she would feel the sensations of her body not as a solid thing, but as a gentle, shifting constellation of energy within the vast, dark space of her awareness. A worrying thought would arise, a bubble in the glass. Instead of trying to annihilate it, she would simply acknowledge it, let the light of her attention shine around it, and watch as it too eventually lost its solidity and dissolved back into the peaceful, star-filled emptiness that she was.